So let's see this.
Okay.
I just need to worry about this one question, right?
Yeah.
All this crossing.
All right, good evening. Welcome to the Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025 regular board work session of the Gresham-Barlow Board of Education. We have in attendance Chris Howitt, Holly Wiegelman, Blake Peterson, David Ligatich, Myra Gomez, and Sean Farnes. Actually, interim superintendent John Cook is not here. We also have with us our consultant from HYA, Brian, and I've never said your last name. Ewert. I see it on the email. Yeah, I see it on ERT.
Long E.
So this evening, we are going to be doing interviews with the superintendent candidates. And before we did that, I did want to read our opening paragraph that is on our policy AC. Gresham-Barlow School District recognizes the diversity and worth of all individuals and groups. It's the policy of this district and the Board of Education that there will be no discrimination or harassment of individuals or groups based on race, color, gender, marital status, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, religion, national origin, age, disability, veteran status, or genetic information in any educational program, activity, or employment. Gresham-Barlow provides equal access to individuals with disabilities. For more information on the policy, see policy AC, ACB, JBB, GBA, GBEA, and JB. So with that, we have no changes to the agenda as it was presented, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting agenda as presented.
I move to approve the meeting agenda as presented.
I second.
Been moved by Sean, seconded by Myra to approve the meeting agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. All right. So Brian.
Sure.
I believe that you're probably on, let me get to my regular page here.
I can kick you off.
I think so. Well, it's the review of the day in the district feedback. And that's our first agenda item. And I wasn't sure if you were going to give us some feedback from that, some of the kind of high level rolled up information.
Yeah, so let me just set the stage for the day. We had an exceptional turnout.
And you're going to need to talk a little bit louder so that the owl picks it up.
Can we move it towards the center a little? If you can reach it, yeah. That was I could reach it.
That long arm.
There we go. There you go.
I'm sorry.
The owl has surprisingly good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had a long day yesterday, started early and went late. The candidates first visited multiple schools. They had a driver assigned to them. After that, we had a nice lunch and we kind of went over what tonight was going to look like. And that's when we talked about the number of questions and the time that they would have. And then in the afternoon, it was really an opportunity for them to introduce themselves to all of the different stakeholder groups. They spent about, 5 or 7 minutes talking about who they were personally and professionally. And then it was an open conversation with whoever that stakeholder group was. We had about 160 people that participated, everything from parents, business owners, students, staff from district office, staff from schools, teachers, union leadership, principals. And it was really engaging. I did not personally go in and listen to every conversation, but we did watch the body language of people, and all 3 of your finalists were highly engaging. And while they were incredibly exhausted last night, I also think that they were also very energized because they got to talk about their passion, which is public education. So during those sessions, we also invited everyone who attended to use a QR code that we had in handout form or posted on the walls to provide you immediate feedback, which has been coming in over the last 12 or 15 hours to a Google Doc. And hopefully you had an opportunity to take a look at that. And tonight at this workshop, it is an opportunity for you to talk about the themes that you saw. And you've already began thinking about that. What emerged from your stakeholder groups, and what did they say about your 3 finalists? And there was a lot of information. I think anywhere between 75 and 85 respondents on each candidate, which is a really good turnout. we know that not everyone who attends actually submits feedback, but that's okay, because you've got a lot of good feedback. This is an opportunity for you guys to talk about that. What do you see in those documents? What kind of feedback did you get? It's an opportunity for you to just talk out loud amongst yourselves about what you saw and what you think. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the day as well.
Question about the day, the various groups, that they spoke with, were they all in the same room and then were able to, or were they
Good
separate?
question. So they were separate in rotations. For example, I think the first rotation was a group of students. Principals was a second group, and the third group, Sarah, help me out, who was in the morning, or the first group? It was district office staff.
Yeah.
So we had 3 separate rooms, and then every 40 minutes, we rotated the candidate to the next room and around robin. So they were never in the same room presenting in front of each other. But they did spend the entire day together in the general same space.
And I know that in the surveys, it was under what the hopes were as far as the turnout for this. Is it typical for this size of district? Is it under what your hopes were over?
For the day in the district, because people have to commit a significant amount of time to see all 3 finalists, this was a very good turnout.
Okay.
And I have to give the staff and everyone who was involved, because I think they did an RSVP system. And everyone showed. Matter of fact, some of the rooms were packed, almost too many people. Like, I think at the parent groups, community groups, we had, instead of 25 in each room, I think there was closer to 30.
Oh, wow.
So it was a very well attended day. And people committed to giving, half a day, really, or 3 or 4 hours at night.
Thank you.
Was the community group, the parents community group, was that the last one in the day?
It
that
was,
later?
yeah.
I kind of surmised that there might have been more people, but at least there were more QR
Yeah.
responses to that group.
Yeah, we were planning only to have 1 classroom open for parents.
Mhm.
We had so many parents and community members show up. We actually divided the parent group into 2
Mm.
classrooms, and even both of those classrooms were completely packed.
Wow.
It
Okay.
was great. It was
Okay.
great.
Did you have a separate group for the parents who didn't speak English?
It wasn't separate. They were in 1 classroom with, there was an interpreter.
I don't remember who the
I don't know who the translator was, but then we also had the documents, the QR codes were also in Spanish, so that they could respond in Spanish.
Mhm.
I think we had about 8 Spanish speaking parents.
Mhm.
That was the only other language represented?
Yes, I mean, there may have been, but we did not have interpreters for like Russian.
Other comments about the? David?
Well, I think, and I don't want to be biased, I think some comments stand out. I say this, I'll sweeten someone. I have a very good idea of each candidate by looking at those comments.
Fair.
I don't want to sway anybody.
It was
Okay.
pretty consistent feedback for each candidate.
And that's a good,
Mhm.
that's a good response as well, that it was, the feedback was pretty consistent among the different groups.
As I read through the comments today, I mean, you can always find some outliers,
Oh.
and that's true in
Mhm.
any search that you do.
Mhm.
But if you look towards the center about what the vast majority of people were saying, you'll see some really common themes for each individual candidate that I think are probably very accurate.
I agree.
Did, on the QR, just procedurally, was 1 entry per person? Or could somebody have responded multiple times?
I don't know if I'm not technical enough to know if it counts IP addresses from your actual device.
Mhm.
But if you take a look at the numbers between 75 and 85, depending on the candidate, that would kind of align with the numbers of people that were in those rooms. We have done searches in the past where immediately following or the next day, you find complete misalignment. So someone was out there, doing some skullduggery on the QR codes that we knew, so we actually had to intervene on that one. On this one, as we watched them come in, it didn't seem like there was anything like that.
Yeah, the comments didn't seem so.
No.
I think I did see common themes, and I think just the superintendent's selection is one part of addressing comments and concerns from the community. The superintendent visioning, goal setting and evaluation is part two of engaging in those community concerns, you know, and I think it will be important for us that we leverage our partnerships outside of these walls. Um, to celebrate this candidate, whoever emerges.
And actually, after talking with all three candidates about how did your day go, they felt like their engagement with the stakeholders was very accurate, and punches were not pulled, and that stakeholders wanted to know answers to questions. And it was hard work, you know, standing in front of large groups of people for, you know, extended periods of time answering those hard questions. But that's what being a superintendent is. It's being in front of your community, being accountable and answering hard questions. And so that's exactly what they did. I don't think your community threw softballs.
It doesn't look like that from some.
No.
of the
No,
feedback
no,
things,
looking
yeah.
at the feedback, I could like imagine like.
Yeah, yeah.
The questions that were asked.
And I thought that it was, you know, recognize that they could leave it anonymously, which again, you said can, but it did not in this case. Put in where people were putting things that were not appropriate to go onto any survey.
Mhm.
They were all very thoughtful comments, but very honest comments, I think, as well. I think there's really some places, and when I was looking through it, I also was looking at it from the viewpoint of where were there potential miscommunication things where the community didn't understand either the role of the superintendent, the role of the board, the circumstances of the culture and environment. And so it always makes me think, okay, whoever we hire with this, continuing to have that conversation about communication. And what does it look like? How frequently, when, in what manner? Because that was, you know, in a few places I just saw some things where I thought, really?
Mhm.
Oh, that was interesting. And I realized that we needed to be just always looking at how can we communicate in a variety of ways. And I don't want to just leave the QR code up all the time, but that's tempting, you know, what do you think's going on today?
Which makes me think, maybe we should leave in that second question from David about communication.
I actually go with that one.
Oh, you gotta go with that.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so. Okay.
Cause that is, as I'm out in the community, or even through the feedback that we receive. From this, it seemed like communication was always an issue, so it's like.
So anything else about the day in and how? Well, maybe I don't want to ask this question. So the students that participated, were they at then a particular school that they were able, because we can't really move kids around?
We had 3 from Gresham High School and 4 from Barlow High School, and I don't know if we had any from
Springwater.
Springwater. I don't know.
So it was just high school students.
Yes,
Do you know anything about the selection process?
I don't. I know principals were involved in selecting kids and also advocating the parents to, hey, get involved. Which is probably the reason you had such a great turnout, is because principals really were out there advocating, like, be involved in the process.
Emails went out.
I said they
Principals
was-
sent out emails and I know to staff and. I don't know if they selected parents to send them, but I know some parents at least got emails. So.
I feel the district's communication about this process has been really good.
Mhm.
I'm seeing it from both the parent side and the board side. It's
Okay,
been really, really good to see.
good, because I don't have anybody in the schools anymore, so I don't see the parent. So did it come at you guys through Parent Square?
Mhm.
Is that how it's the communication? Okay. Anything you noticed, Myra, or anything you want to say about it?
I think if we pulled kids out of class to meet with the candidates, I would have asked the kids. I would have somehow made sure that they filled out their feedback. We only have 3 kids who commented. So if we had 7 kids, I would have wanted to see 7 responses.
Agreed.
Same thing with parents, like, I don't know if they were asked if they needed help filling it out. There were 8 Spanish speaking parents there, there's only one
I
response.
saw the one. response, yeah.
So I would have, I don't know, obviously I wasn't there, so I wonder if they just didn't want to, they wanted to just listen and not provide feedback, or if they didn't want to work. Yeah,
Or possibly responded in English.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly,
True,
that's,
yeah,
yes, yes, you're completely right.
Also, I don't know what the response form looked like. I didn't look at that QR code myself, but it was different per candidate, correct? So they could have responded for one candidate and not responded for
Correct.
others.
Uh-huh,
Yeah, you
exactly.
had to hit, the QR codes were different for each candidate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct. And that's why you'll have a differentiation. Maybe someone didn't want to comment on an internal
Yeah.
candidate, but I do want to comment on the external.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm. Anything else?
The other thing I would add, just about, how fierce was I about trying to get the feedback? Sarah can acknowledge, I went into every room and I'm like, look, the board wants your feedback. Please hit the QR codes, take a flyer, do it at home tonight. And so we did hit it pretty hard, but I think some people are like, we're just there to be engaged in the process, but maybe not provide feedback. So,
But I did see, because I checked it different times in the last 24 hours. That it seemed like your district ag and principal, they responded pretty early. But then the parents were responding even up through 2 o'clock today.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah, because I had looked and then when I went back, I was like, oh, there's more,
Yeah.
some that hadn't even been organized
Yeah.
nicely
That's what I'm
yet.
seeing
So
right
they were
now.
clearly still coming in.
Yeah.
And we did shut it down at 2. And that was for the HYA back of the office to format all of the cells
Yeah.
correctly. You probably saw her in there formatting
Yeah.
while we were going, yeah.
And so actually the timestamp must be on
East
Chicago
Coast,
time.
East Coast,
Because-
yeah.
It probably is, yes.
Because it,
Cause I was looking at the time, I was
because I
like,
looked
that's
at
not
it,
right.
yeah, I was
It's
looking
like
at
we
it
have-
earlier yesterday and I went, wait, it's
Well,
not
and,
that time yet,
and
is it?"
today it said the 22nd and I was like, or last night, I'm like, it's not the 22nd.
Yeah,
21st,
yeah.
it's my God, it's
I
been
know
no
it's on
day.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So-
Well, she called and she said, do you want to shut it down at 2 o'clock Pacific time or, and I'm like, Pacific time.
Yeah, yeah,
And
Yeah.
It's good clarification.
We're,
yeah.
it's 2 hour difference.
So, and then, I don't know, this is just one of those, if any of the candidates say, I'm curious about what the feedback was, do they get, because it's public, I mean, it's in.
So Mike and I are happy to sit or talk with candidates about the kind of feedback that they got back. We will
Yeah, they
not
should.
give them the actual
Mhm.
feedback form because we told the community, like, this is for the board.
Right,
This is the board's
Right.
feedback. But if a candidate said, hey, can I have a conversation with you? We'd be happy to do that. We do that a lot if candidates ask.
yeah, because this is available for the board, it's not in the records, it doesn't show up in any
Yeah.
of that, so.
And this is on
anything else,
Hazard Young and Atia's website.
Right, right,
or,
right, right.
Do,
survey.
do the candidates that we interviewed but were not selected as finalists, do they get the same opportunity to ask for feedback?
And some do, and some don't.
Okay.
question, since this is on HYA website and you've already mentioned us using this for other reasons. Will we always have access to this or is this something that we should print if we want to access or
We can just
somehow?
make a copy.
You could
of
print
it.
hard copies, but we could always get you access.
Okay.
Because it's the data that you've asked HYA to collect on your behalf. So yeah, we can get that data.
I would, I don't want to, if there's any way that we can pull it, have it.
Yeah, I
as
think we
well,
can make a copy of
accessible
it. and
Just
save
for
it.
future conversations.
I'm honest, I have downloaded most of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Sarah has had access, editing rights to everything along the way.
Not this year,
Well
cause it's so
done.
fresh, but.
Well,
You just can't
some
move,
of it, you
Sarah.
may want to look at it later.
Yeah,
Oh, I think,
Or-
especially the feedback is
Yeah,
we can only
Yeah.
survey so many times and then, the survey fatigue comes in, so
Yeah.
we shouldn't
Well,
waste
and the-
any
and the
survey.
reading the responses
we get.
fatigue shows
Yeah,
up too.
exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
you want to be fresh looking at the responses, the right frame of mind, as it were, so. Okay, all right. So anything else on that? It sounds like it was a good, I was worried how many people would show up and if they would actually, because I started watching it pretty early in the thing and there was like 4 comments for quite some time. And I thought, well, okay then. They must not have anything to say. And then they started rolling it, which is why I wondered how late in the afternoon, if people were more able to show up.
Yeah.
Um,
A lot of people took the flyers home and said, I need
and worked on.
time to process
Got
that.
it,
Yeah.
got it,
That's
okay.
fine.
And that was evidenced by the time of. the-
Yeah.
And some of
And
them
the
didn't
quantity
want to
started.
fill it out on their phone either, so they
Right.
wanted to get back to
Yep.
their computers and able to fully.
Yeah, I wondered on some of the long ones, I'm like, I can't get that many on my phone.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd say we are very pleased as associates. the feedback that came through this last part of this process. Very good.
Okay. Okay. All right.
With, I'm gonna ask for the engagement, the community asks hard questions. In a civil way.
Yes, I did not hear any of the candidates. Maybe there was one situation where it got a little personal because they had been involved with a situation and that felt a little like a personal attack. But that was not that was not common. The community was very respectful. Sarah, is that what you heard too? I mean.
Yeah, for the most part. There wasn't like any yelling in here.
No, there was laughter, there was clapping.
Yeah.
It felt good.
It's probably worth considering as a board. I mean, this information that came back to us is valuable. It might be worth as a board considering how we summarize it back to the community as part of our process. I don't know what that would look like, but I can say that, the themes of our initiative were predictable themes, but well articulated from different perspectives. How we plans to address particularly marginalized students or students who are experiencing barriers in education. How to deal with safety concerns within the schools. I saw those. And I saw in general, overall achievement concerns. How do we?
I like that. I'm wondering what that looks like, because we told the people who were sending this in that this was a. I the word right now, sorry,
Anonymous.
anonymous. I do like where you're going though.
But I think you could,
Look at you using your equity lens.
you could, how's this?
I'm proud of you. Look at you.
That was a compliment.
You
That
could
was not a chastise, that was a compliment.
You could do like one of those analysis, use one of those analysis tools to develop the themes that come out of these. And then report them, you don't have to give specific comments, but then,
That's true.
Like the
Like
ones we use
those
for
bubble-
dissertations.
yeah,
bubble
yeah,
coding.
like one of those where you
Coding
just put in all the
software.
comments, spit out kind of the theme.
I would also add that there were varied perspectives. The fourth component that's hard to slice is the varied perspectives on stability versus change, status quo versus change.
Yeah.
That are gonna be up to the board to slice and dice and figure out.
Yeah, there's equally as
Yeah,
many.
Like the,
comments.
yeah, the areas that communities asking for change in the areas where they want stability.
From your perspective, do you feel that we had good representation from both the Gresham and Barlow side, from the teachers and community? From what you were able to see?
Possibly, I mean, I don't know enough of the teachers, I think, to really know in that aspect who came or the parents. To know which side of the district they were from. So I don't know
And
if
they might not have all been high
accuracy.
school
That's true.
teachers, they could have.
Yeah, or that's,
elementary or
if it's
middle,
elementary,
yeah.
middle, high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of principal, yes, we did have a spread of what principals were there.
And it
I
looks
know
like we
them
had a
pretty
few
well, but
classified too.
Yeah,
yeah, there was quite a few
Which I'm always
classified.
glad when we have some
Yeah,
classified.
because we had there was an all staff session, so that was both either classified or licensed. So,
in the, I don't know, the Venn diagram of staff engagement, was it all union leadership reflected the teachers, or were there teachers who were not in union leadership who were also at the table?
Yeah, so union leadership had their own.
Okay.
And there was about 10, both classified and teacher leaders from that group. So we kind of differentiated them and gave them their own group. And that's why it was a much smaller group. But then we had a lot of teachers. We had teachers that came to the community sessions too, just because it was easier to come at night. So I did see a couple of teachers there.
The teachers that came during the day, did they get like release period or how did that work?
We didn't have a teacher session during the day.
Oh.
the first teacher one was like.
At 4 o'clock.
Which is kind of when I started noticing.
Yeah.
Because I had the same thought, I thought, where are the teachers at? And then I started seeing.
For ours, though, we would see all of that as labeled as certified
Mhm.
staff. for both of those groups, correct? Okay.
Yeah, it didn't differentiate
Yeah.
union.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah.
And so just further clarification too, community member, could have been a business person, someone that was part of one of the organizations that
Could have been.
did not have student in, was not a parent, was not a staff member, just a,
Yes.
okay, and we recruited through, how did we gather those names? I don't remember. I know the chamber was
Athena
one
had
of
a
the
pretty
places.
sophisticated
Yeah,
process.
it had
You know, it's
chamber,
chamber
communicators.
communicators, another. Yeah, I know for sure,
Like Rotary,
chamber, yeah.
okay, okay. Cause that's sometimes a hard group to really actually get to talk about education things, because they're not a parent, they're not a staff member, they're not a student. And making sure that we're talking to them about education issues and not just fundraising issues. Okay. All right. Anything else about it? Anything else that you saw?
Common themes throughout each candidate,
Mhm.
both in the proactive. Reactive.
Mhm. Mhm. Good. Anything else, Brian, that we should know about? Anything else we should see in this? I would like to have it archived in some way. And we'll have access to it for at least a short time before you
I think Sarah
take it away
has,
from us.
probably has copies of everything already.
I haven't downloaded this one yet.
Yeah.
Just about everything else I have.
Yeah. We don't delete the dashboard. We'll have the dashboard for a while.
Okay. Sometimes just doing a search on paper. Or when you say download, was that you download?
Like, yeah.
Okay.
Made a copy of it, trust me.
Sure, in the old days.
So then you can
download,
actually
print
search.
it.
You can do that, control F, find.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
I will say, Brian, I appreciate your process. It's been extremely fair. From beginning to today, not what I expected,
Mhm.
but when I've gone through it. I think every candidate from the beginning until this night has had the same experience.
Mhm.
100%.
Try to make sure that even if it's an internal candidate,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Really appreciate that.
you bet.
All right, so. Anything else? So if we want to take a break, go off camera for a minute. All right, so should we take a break, and we will have our first candidate that will come in at 6 o'clock. And everybody will be in person for the interview. The interviews are public. And we will be interviewing Dr. Raina Briggs, Dr. Angela Freeman, and Dr. Tracy Klinger. And that's the order that they will be in. Each one of them has listed an hour, so about 50 minutes for the conversation and Q&A, but they will be in here present and we will be on camera at that point. When the interviews are done, we will go out of public session, have discussion in executive session, come out of executive session, and if we're ready to make an appointment back in public session. So that's kind of how the rest of the meeting will go.
Could I ask procedurally this, is that kind of like appointment pending successful contract
I
negotiations?
believe that's
kind of
what the
thing?
motion says.
Oh, you
Yeah,
got it.
mhm,
Okay.
yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't
there's a
actually
sample
see the
motion in
motion.
here, and that is usually the operation, is that it's pending successful contract negotiation. So that's how that usually works. But we do that, we can have a consensus in executive, but then we come out, we actually make the decision.
So, also procedurally, obviously, if it'll be public record who decide, which doesn't give the other two candidates the opportunity to get that phone call, then if it falls through, whatever. Like, how do we roll? I mean, like, I would imagine that the outlook would pick up on that pretty quickly. Like
I
how,
would imagine the other candidates are watching. I imagine all of them.
When you guys come out of executive session, all three will likely be watching.
Yeah.
So, and then we'll talk to them, either later tonight or tomorrow, all of them.
okay,
So,
In your experiences, that's a good process. It's fair to the candidates and.
yeah, and,
It's what they expect.
and because it's a public process too, which makes it tricky. So you can't get out there and call everyone, kind of like in the first round, which is always a confidential and an executive session. So this makes it a little different. But all three of the finalists, will absolutely likely be watching you guys come out of executive session and have that conversation if you're ready to make a motion, a second discussion, and then call for the roll. Another thing that I have seen happen is like if there isn't consensus, you can put it off till, think about it, whatever. But in a split situation, there could be a motion, there could be a second, and the roll call could fail. So that can happen too. And that's just part of the democratic process. But I think that when you guys are in deliberation, you'll have a sense of, what everyone's kind of thinking before you ever go out and make some decisions publicly. So.
Okay, all right.
fair enough.
So for that, it's 5:42. I'll take this out of our active session and we'll take a break for about 15 minutes. So the first candidate comes in. Okay. Welcome.
Chris, that was your- Colleen.
Nice to meet you first.
Over.
Oh,
Over the-
video last time.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you get the spot all the way up front there.
Awesome, awesome.
All right. So good evening. We are back after our brief intermission with the beginning of our superintendent finalist interviews. It's Gresham-Barlow Board of Education, January 22nd, regular board work session. The board interviewed 7 superintendent candidates in a special work session held January 11th, 2025. Following those interviews, the board narrowed the candidate pool to 3 finalists for the superintendent position. Finalists spent a day in the district touring schools and meeting with students, staff, families, and community members on January 21st, 2025. The board will hold final interviews with candidates during this meeting. After the interviews, the board will convene an executive session to deliberate. We will come out of executive session to determine our selection. This evening, starting us off, we have Dr. And is it Rainey or Rain? Rainey Briggs. So good evening and welcome. We kind of informally introduced ourselves as you walked in. I'm Chris Howard, board chair. And we have some questions for you. I think you had a sample of the questions. We modified them slightly. We didn't totally throw them out and redo them. We also had to go through and look at them for the sake of time. We had to eliminate a couple of them because we weren't gonna have enough time for you to have thoughtful answers to it.
I've never had a sample, so this is. the
Okay,
first time
perfect,
maybe
perfect.
saying
We
it.
weren't sure if you
So,
did or not,
yeah.
so, okay, perfect.
Yep.
And so we're gonna go around, we each have at least 1 or 2 questions that we're
Okay.
gonna ask. And you guys don't mind, I'll just start.
Mhm.
Okay, all right. So mine is, yesterday, you spent a full day in the district visiting schools and meeting with stakeholders. Provide your reflections and highlights of the day, and based on what you saw and heard, do you have any accolades or concerns?
It's a great question. I would say, my visit in the 3 schools that I went into, staff was amazing. I got to meet a lot of great staff. I got to interact with a lot of kids, at all different levels, in the classrooms. Got to see some really unique spaces, automotives at Gresham High School, was really, really cool. To see the kids working on a car, changing the gaskets, that was really cool. And then also to get to go into the theater and see that facility. There were some kids working outside the theater, working on some plays, things like that. So just seeing the kids really engaged was really awesome to see. Another thing that I thought was really cool is your focus at all 3 levels. You saw the buildup in each of the school levels around hate and unity, working together. And you got to see it from an elementary level as I walked in north. You get to see the signs on the walls. You get to see their response PBIS, characteristics that they want every student to glean. You got to see that. And at the middle school, you got to see some things very similar to that. So you see it building in each of the levels so that students kind of understand what's expected. So there was definitely a level of connection between the schools, and as I understand it, those schools kind of feed into each other. So that's a great thing that I got to see. Also, just meeting with the principals, it was great to hear their perspective on things as they are leading the schools, and even just some of the challenges that they face, whether it's with attendance, whether it's with achievement. I got to hear and see from their perspective things that they feel like are challenges and successes. I had great tour guides. I had 2 students at the high school who really knew that school. They were both seniors and really took pride in that school, really took pride in being a student in this district. And do you have any accolades or concerns? I would say just, by way of having conversations with, different individuals, whether that was staff or that was students. Some students felt like There are kids vaping, in the bathrooms, vaping next to them in class. There's, students not in class. So you had a number of kids kind of indicating that to me, which would be definitely a concern as I look at the data and see that attendance is a huge factor. But seeing students not in class is a huge concern. But like I said, for accolades, just the camaraderie that I saw with staff, the connection that I also saw with the build up to some of the PBIS characteristics across the different levels was really, really powerful to see.
All right, Dr. Gomez?
As superintendent, you will need to proactively address and support the shifting racial and socioeconomic demographics within our schools. What specific strategies will you implement to ensure that all students and staff, regardless of their background, receive equitable opportunities and resources? How will you measure the progress and ensure accountability?
Yeah, I think the very first thing that I would say needs to happen is listening and learning from me. There's I call it the beloved community. 6 steps to social change is first steps. I think I may have shared this with you before, but really thinking about that information gathering. I need to really understand and know from the stakeholders, whether that's you as board members, whether there's teachers, there's students, there's parents, that you really want to have a clear understanding around their experiences that they've had in the district, so that you can really generate what might be some different steps, what might be some ideas they give me, and so to support the entire administrative team in leading that work. I want to be clear, this isn't something that just Rainey sits in a corner and do by himself. There's a team of leaders, there's a team of staff, there's a team of students that would definitely get behind this work to ensure that we have every background, whether it's racially, socioeconomically, whether that's our ELL students, whoever it is, that they feel like they belong. So when you think about the steps that I would take, as much as I want to sit here and give you a 4-step plan, I think it really starts with gathering information while also gaining some insight from the individuals who are here and experiencing the things that they're experiencing. I can take a guess at maybe some things, but I also want to be accurate, right? And I also want to not only build the capacity for our students and families in the community, but I also want to build the capacity of our leadership team and our staff, so that when we start thinking about being equitable, that it's not something that's just done at the leadership level. That's something that's done in the classroom. That's something that's done, boots on the ground in the community as well. So also connecting with the different organizations in the community to ensure that they're linked and connected to the school system related to things that we really want to ensure connects to our strategic plan related to our equity focus. So.
Okay. Director Regan.
Okay, how do you intend to establish clear accountability structures within our district to ensure that all stakeholders, including staff, teachers, administrators, and students, are held to high standards of performance and conduct?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say first things first, again, wanting to really understand what's kind of been happening, what's been the experience for individuals in this district, while also taking a look at prior accountability measures, really looking at our strategic plan, looking at the action steps within the strategic plan to really see what those action steps that's in the plan, what are the accountability measures for those action steps, and then also reassure that those action steps have some accountability measures aligned to them and connected to them, but also thinking about from a leadership standpoint, how do I know that our leaders in the district are standing on what we said we're going to do, right? When we think about our observations, our evaluations for administrators, what does that look like? And making sure that we have a solid and sound evaluation tool and process for those individuals. Making sure for our classroom teachers, our educator effectiveness, observation tools are, whether it's by state or whether there's something that's been developed, and I didn't see anything online, but whether that's developed or something that's from the state that we would use to ensure effective instruction, effective supports that may be needed to support our staff and students getting what they need. And as it relates to our students being in our schools, when we think about our code of conduct, we think about our classroom expectations that are usually should be derived from conversations and connections with students and classroom teachers and staff. So those expectations hopefully aren't just developed by teachers and just given to kids to follow. The hope is that these expectations are built in conjunction with students so that students have some ownership and take some ownership in those expectations. But as it relates to our code of conduct, ensuring that our code of conduct has a progressive discipline structure that is also restorative in nature. Just because you make a mistake, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the world for you, right? You should have some levels of return and response to things that you didn't do so well that we can get better at by also supporting you through that process. So I would say definitely leaning into maybe some of the structures that currently exist and then getting some feedback around some of those structures so that we can make some adjustments as we see fit, but also do that through a continuous school improvement mindset.
Okay. All right.
School safety encompasses a wide range of challenges from addressing bullying and mental health to preparing for emergencies and fostering a school environment. How do you personally define safety in a school district? How would you collaborate with staff, families, and community partners to create and sustain a culture of safety in the district? And what metrics would you use to assess and improve safety over time?
Yeah, I would say how I'm gonna go through these.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do I personally define safety? I would say my personal definition of safety in schools is that every kid feel like this is a place that they can come, learn, have a good time while they're learning, and success and being successful in that process. If kids are feeling like they're safe, they're going to learn. If kids know that there's safety, protocols in place, they're going to learn. So ensuring that students know that school is safe, and I'll know that by them being here, by them being in our schools, by them being in the classroom, not just in our schools, but also in our classrooms. I think also when it comes to collaborating with families and staff and the community, related to, and as we partner to create and sustain a culture of safety in the district, I think it's really important as you think about how are we getting their voices? How are we hearing their voices related to their kids? I know in the district that I currently work in, we do a school perception survey. That school perception survey goes out to students, it goes out to staff, it also goes out to parents. And that survey, there's anywhere, I think it's about 20 to maybe 25 questions that are there. And safety is a big one on there, where it's asking parents, do you feel like your kids are safe? Asking the kids, are you safe at school? What do you like most about school? Do you have a staff member at school that you can go to when there are challenges? So really utilizing a tool to some degree like that to really gather that feedback. And I'm not sure if I said this before, but currently I have a student, staff, and parent advisory committee to the superintendent, and I meet with them, monthly currently. And with that, this survey is what we bring into the space, the results and the feedback from this survey, we bring that into the space, and then we prioritize the different things that have a huge meaning to parents, to students, and the staff. And of course, safety, as you relate to bullying, harassment, as it relates to discipline, all kind of usually leans into that. So I would really utilize that survey to give us some initial feedback to kind of build upon, to kind of give us also some kind of direction. But also, how would I improve, or what metrics would I use? Based on the school perception survey, it also comes with a metric to kind of support us with knowing where we want to go with the process of keeping our school safety safe. But for me, it's also making sure we're doing our drills, doing our safety drills, whether that's our fire drills, whether that's, I want to say, active threat or something of that nature in our schools. but also leaning into our expectations related to safety in our classrooms. But utilizing some of those protocols that support us in the process of program.
What about the community partners? How would you collaborate with the community?
Oh, absolutely. So with our community partners, thinking about whether it's the city, the Chamber of Commerce, some of our Rotary clubs, Boys and Girls Clubs. So utilizing some of those facilities if need be to be places that we evacuate to. And I know that currently when we do our drills or we work on, or we do have a situation where we have to evacuate, building a relationship with our different community organizations to work with us very closely, whether that's also the police department. I don't know if you guys got sheriffs out here. I haven't seen it yet, but building those relationships and establishing those relationships also because we want them to be in conjunction with working in conjunction with us from a safety standpoint, inviting them into our drills so that they can see how those drills play out, work out with their support. I would also say when we think about where we would evacuate to, making sure that we've established some really solid and sound relationships with those individuals that oversee those facilities, but then also just making connections with local college, community college, Mount Hood, and other organizations that we want to establish to give our kids also opportunities where they can kind of build relationships as well. So I think having those relationships with the school kind of supports how we see safety being a huge part of who we are based on how we utilize those different organizations in the community.
All right, Director Liggett.
I'm gonna ask you the second question. How will you establish open and transparent communication channels to inform and engage parents about pressing educational priorities and challenges within the Gresham-Barlow School District? How will they be involved in the critical decision-making of the district?
Yeah. For this one, I would say when it comes to transparent communication, I think a really big piece is first off, identifying what does transparent mean. Because I think there's some people, when you say transparent, they want everything, right? Even things that they shouldn't have or can't have due to FERPA, HIPAA, that kind of thing. So I would really make sure that the things that people really need to know based on what's supporting their kids, what's supporting them and being engaged as parents in the community, different events and social things that are happening within the school district, things that are going on with the superintendent at the district level to support what their needs may be, at home or in the community. So I think first off, it's just knowing what should be communicated to those individuals and making sure that that's communicated and openly. So things would be posted to the superintendent page so that it's also accessible. Things would be translated to support our families who are whether Spanish speakers, and I know there's over 91 languages. So really looking at how and where do we go to translate all of the different languages so families can access those things. And then for, making sure that parents are engaged, it's also, like I said, there's that survey, but also thinking about that parent advisory committee, which I think is really, really huge to have their perspective at the table. So even thinking about decision-making, I think that was a huge part here too. What are those things that are important for me around decision-making? Making sure we have data at the table, making sure we have the right people at the table, making sure that the decisions that we're going to be making, knowing who it's going to impact and what is the possible impact. So those 4 things are really, really important in that process of making sure that the decisions that we're making is having a direct impact on kids and also connected to our strategic plan in the process. So I want to make sure I covered everything in that question. Pressing education authorities, challenges with the application. So you asked, how would I continue to educate on parents on pressing educational priorities? I think by way of utilizing our website, I know we have, I think Infinite Campus here, that's a communication tool that goes out to families whenever there's something in particular like whether it's our test scores or whether it's a particular communication around testing that's going to be taking place, giving them, information related to, some key strategies to have your kids ready for testing. So ensuring those things are a part of it so that they can serve as parents to support kids in being ready for those things. So from an educational perspective, making sure that even at the school levels, there's newsletters, making sure that things are going out via newsletters. Thinking about, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, and I know TikTok is wavering right now, but all those different, engines to really support parents who may be not on Facebook, but Instagram, not on Instagram, but on TikTok, making sure we have some level of communication established to ensure that they're getting the needed information related to our educational priorities.
All right, Director Peterson.
Hi, Dr. Briggs. In what ways have students and families changed over the course of your career? What challenges and opportunities do those changes present to public education and specifically the Gresham-Barlow School District?
Ooh, that's a really good question too. How have families and students changed over the course of my career? I would say that over the course of my career, earlier on in my career, and depending upon at the different levels, at the elementary, I mean, you still have this, but it's shifted a little bit where you have parents who are totally engaged, right? And a part of their kids' educational journey starting in elementary. And as they get to middle school, they're still engaged, but they started to teeter off a little bit. And then at the high school level, there's still parents engaged, but you don't see them as engaged as much. And I think back in the day, I'm getting myself old, but back in the day, you actually got to see it across the board where families were engaged all the way through the system. Now, why is it different? I think it's probably different because there's different needs that families have, right? There's families working third shifts, second shifts. The kids are coming to school, they're entrusting us to support their students with the additional needs that they have at school. But at the same time, when there are challenges, many of the parents are Johnny on the spot and want to be there to support their kids. So I think knowing that there are different dynamics, there's different perspectives and cultures that people decide that certain things resonates with them in a way that allows their kids to know that they can trust, us in the school system, as well. So make sure I didn't miss anything there. And what way is it? Course of career, what challenges and opportunities is this challenge? I think what challenge it presents for us is when I think about our current attendance, in our district, we have 60% of our students attend school 90% of the time, right? So when you think about some of the challenges of families really believing that we got this for you, they're hoping that maybe their kids are going to get up, get ready, get to school, but some kids aren't showing up to school, right? So when you think about 40% of your kids not attending school, that's a huge engagement issue actually in school because the kids aren't there, right? So I think that's a huge challenge. But then I think engagement is also another challenge because if they're not in school, they won't be engaged. So how do we ensure that, number one, we're utilizing our resources to change our attendance, with students or our engagement with students in the class, utilizing our social workers, counselors, psychs to really help us understand what's really happening on that level with kids to get that engagement and attendance, up in our schools. I would say another challenge is our academics based on some of the family challenges and struggles that they have. Because if families are working third shift, or even second shift, sometimes kids may have homework. They don't have, that parent that's maybe there, overlooking them to kind of do some things. They may have siblings who are in sports and clubs and activities who are also responsible for getting their siblings kind of moving and going, that they can't always be there also to support their siblings. So, you have academics, when you really look at third grade, 31% of our students are proficient, in third grade literacy. That's a very, very low percentage of our kids that are proficient. We look at math, we have 16% across the district in eighth grade that are proficient. So when you really think about, the things that we can bring into the space to kind of uplift these things is number one, helping parents understand the resources that we can provide. Helping them understand maybe some of the after school opportunities that we have to provide for students. So it's something that's taken off their plate of worry for their students reaching those academic, accolades. And then I would also say just really leaning into helping parents and the community kind of know we have resources. Ask, talk to us about them, but it's also our job to make sure we're putting those resources out and making it known that we have those to kind of change what it used to be to where we are now, to meeting somewhere in the middle based on the resources that we kind of have.
I'm gonna cycle back up. Byron, did you want to add something? I know you had just one sort of multi-question.
I already asked it.
I know, but I didn't know if you had another follow-up to that, okay? There was another one on mine, I think we'll have enough to go around all the way. Can you provide a perspective on the proper relationship between the Board of Education and the superintendent? What decisions do you bring to the board for action? What do you make with your team and then inform the board? So we're the relationship with the board.
Yeah, I think it's really important to really think about the board and superintendent relationship and really look at it as being a cohesive, collaborative group of people living in this, the idea of the same goals and outcomes that we want to have for the district. Shouldn't be any silos. It shouldn't be me doing anything on my own that's not, you knowing of that. So when I think about that relationship is really critical to the success of all students, all staff, and also the school at large within the community. So those relationships are really important to have collaborative, to be able to process things and not really get on the table with those things as we're processing those things. I would also say from a decision making standpoint, I believe that there's usually committees in districts, whether that's finance committee, whether that's personnel, whether that's finance committee. There's different committees that board members have usually been a part of, and it's usually 2 or 3 board members. And it usually should start there when it comes down to some decisions that we want to get the whole board's perspective on and vote on or what have you. So my hope would be that if those committees, and I didn't see them on, I think I did see them online actually, with those committees being able to bring things to the committee with a perspective of why something is needed, why something should be probably processed or done a particular way, and make sure that it's very clear, it's understood why things need to be that way, but that's also working with you to better understand your perspective on those things that we're bringing to the board. Usually, I meet with the board president and vice president, weekly. So if there were things that I really wanted to get some perspective on from board members before it kind of came to the whole board, I would definitely run it by them. And usually, sometimes I also run it by other board members in my monthly meetings just to kind of get their perspectives, as well. It's not about what I can get you to vote in a particular direction on. Is really providing you the information around it so that you can make the best possible decision that's going to have the best impact on kids. That's the purpose of us really coming together on decisions. And what is it linked to? How is it linked to our strategic plan? How is it linked to our school goals to support student outcomes at the different levels? I think I answered that.
All right, Director Riegelman.
Okay, how would you respond to parent complaints about teacher performance?
How would I respond to parent complaints to teacher risk? I would first off say, as the superintendent, I'm hoping that the parents have had a conversation with the building principal. That's the very first, question I would have. And actually, I would go a step further to say, hopefully they've had a conversation with the teacher first, right? And if they've had a conversation with the teacher, then I would ask if they had a conversation with the building principal. And if they've had a conversation with the building principal, we do have, I know in the district here, we have either a director that supervises the principals, making sure that they now connect with the building supervisor in terms of the director. Because I really hope that within those first 3 steps, things are somewhat kind of handled. There's some kind of satisfaction with what, you know, is a concern or a complaint. Because what I want to do is keep anything from getting to you all as a board. And my hope is that in the process of dealing with it on the different levels that exist, that it's not something that get to you. It may be something that I mentioned to the board chair, you know, just to say, hey, I just want to put this on your radar, just in case if you get a call or what have you. But hopefully there's a communications flow chart that exists when it comes to complaints that I would really hope we can establish, so that not only do we understand the flow of communication, but also parents kind of understand it too. Because if a parent came right to me, there's a really good chance that he or she may not understand, you know, that the communication structure to best support them getting what some direction in what's kind of happening. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Dr. Florence, did you have another thought?
Sure. Describe a problem you faced in your current or previous position and outline the specific steps you took to resolve the issue, highlighting the details of your decision-making process and any innovative solutions you implement.
Describe a problem you faced in your current or previous position online, the facility steps that you were taking to resolve the issue. I'm gonna speak to this one because I think this one took a lot to kind of process in a really short amount of time. Last May, in the school district that I'm currently in, there was a parent who decided that he wanted to come onto the graduation stage and come at me and push me out of the way. He didn't want me to shake his daughter's hand. So from that, in my mind, the first thing that went through my mind is, am I safe that this individual is here? I mean, he's indicated to me that he didn't want me to touch his daughter. So I had to push him away to kind of get a good look. Does he have a weapon? Is there something that he has that can harm me? Is there something that he has that can harm the other students that are in the space for graduation? And then also thinking about the other 4,000 people that were in the space. So that was the initial piece that we had the problem with. Now, once that was kind of dealt with, there was still the graduation that needed to resume, right? Now, mind you, I didn't know who the individual was at the time, but I'm wondering, was there someone else that was going to be coming onto this stage? So as I'm shaking students' hands as they come through, I'm also looking out into the audience to make sure there's no one else that's going to come onto the stage. So for me, it's now looking to make sure there's no other individuals that's going to come onto the stage, while at the same time maintaining a level of support for all the students that were graduating. And then even after this all happened, it became a worldwide thing. So from that, I really wanted to get on and do some interviews to let people know that this isn't what the community is made of. This community isn't built on individuals making decisions like this. This community is a lot stronger than this, and helping people kind of understand that this isn't how we operate. And I think just from that process, it really took me to a place of really thinking about the steps that I had to think about with safety. Right? I had to think about safety. I had to think about these kids who are at the pinnacle of their educational career, as seniors getting ready to graduate, not wanting to have that disrupted even more than it already was. So maintaining that atmosphere and environment for those students, while at the same time making sure, again, everybody was safe, the operations of things was good, that there was no longer a safety issue for me on that stage. And then lastly, making sure that the message related to what took place and the message that related to, how people saw the incident was very clear as well. Some people thought that it was racially motivated. I never once said that it was racially motivated, but the only person that knew whether it was racially motivated or not was the individual that came onto the stage. He's the only one that can answer that question. So it wasn't mine to answer for anyone. But I wanted to also identify for the masses that this isn't how this community operates. So those were the steps that I kind of took in this particular problem that I faced. That was pretty global in nature, and the things that I had to think about. Like I said, it felt like 30 minutes, but it was all of 15 seconds to really think about all of those things.
Director Lynch.
All right, how would you initiate a thorough analysis of the current state testing data? Pinpointing specific areas of weakness and disparities among different student groups, and then address the identified achievement gaps.
How would I go about initiating a thorough analysis? I would first off take a look at and have my administrative team kind of come around the table with our report cards and looking at our district report card first to really unpack what we're kind of noticing there. You heard me kind of give you some of that data already and really unpacking what does this mean for us? What does this mean for our students? The report cards kind of break it down really good, actually, and tells you at the grade levels what's of not success. It tells you the subject. It also tells you from an attendance standpoint what demographic groups are attending at a certain percentage. It breaks all of this down for you. So from that perspective, utilizing what our state already provides for us and having definitely some current state versus desired state conversations related to that report card. And from that data, really looking at the areas that we have of weakness, right? And with those areas of weakness, what does that really mean? Who's impacted, because of this weakness that we see from this data? And then also thinking about different demographic groups and how we can think about what the data is telling us related to those demographic groups, and then also looking at our system to say, are we meeting these students' needs? So by way of our multi-level systems of support, this should be another piece of data that's supporting us within that multi-level systems of support in which we're leaning into to have some deeper conversations, think about resources that we have, wondering, are we in a place of needing more resources to help us overcome the weaknesses that we kind of have or disparities, and also identifying the achievement gaps. I would also say the belief gap, as much as I want to say the achievement gap, there's a belief gap. And that belief gap is really our kids believing in themselves enough to have the achievement that they want to have. So really thinking about what that can look like. But that's a part of the data that we're looking at and unpacking within our multi-level systems of support. So that piece of our system is really unpacking and having even conversations beyond the district level and now leaning into our professional learning communities and how the teachers see this data, what they understand this data to mean and be, and how do they see it connecting to their instruction. And then even beyond that, having our students take a look at this data, right? Students need to also understand what the data means and how this data is impacting not only them, but also as people look to come to this district, how is that either causing people to say, nah, I'm good, or, this is a place that I want to be, right? So looking at all of those different levels of stakeholders and really unpacking it, but also thinking about our parents. Our parents really need to understand our data as well, to really analyze it and to understand what it means. And then what are the resources that can come from this analyzing this data to support the outcomes that we want to see different in the process.
Wow. Dr. Briggs, what is your approach to strategic planning?
Can I ask a question real
Yeah,
quick?
sure.
Did you want me to pinpoint areas that need, that we have challenges in?
I think that my question comes from constituents of the Oregon Moms Union. They look at the data.
Yeah.
We as a board understand we were given the data and we understand why we're at where we're at. What they want to know is, we know why we're at where we're at. What are you doing about it? So in layman's terms, right?
Okay. Yeah, so I think knowing what the data is telling us and where we are and what we're going to do about it, I think is really coming down to really re-looking at our systems of support. I talked about that a little bit, but I think we know what the data is telling us. How effective is our current systems of support? Is there accountability measures in place that when we notice that a kid is getting or having, you know, some academic challenges, it's not proficient, what are we putting in place? What interventions are we putting in place to support students? Do we have enough interventions in place? So there's a lot of analyzing that we would have to do to make sure that we have the supports in place to change the data that we're seeing. But if we don't have the supports to do that, we really need to analyze, how do we get to that place? The funds that we're using right now, do we need to, you know, reallocate our funds? Are we getting the return on investment from our current use of funds for resources to support the outcome of that data being different? So utilizing our resource different, utilizing our systems of support, multi-level systems of support, and its fidelity. Not just saying that we do it, but looking at it and making sure that we're utilizing those steps on the particular days, whether it's PD days, whether it's our early release days that we have here as well as, you know, some of our probably conversations that we're having within our professional learning communities.
Thanks for the question and the follow-up.
All right, Director Peterson.
Dr. Briggs, what's your approach to strategic planning? How do you lead this process? Who's involved? How do you seek input, build consensus among diverse stakeholders? There's a lot there.
Yeah, there is. No worries. I got you. So my approach to strategic planning is not something that one person does, nor is it just a one group thing. Strategic planning is really consistent of many stakeholders. And those stakeholders are from students all the way to community members outside of the school. And making sure that there's a representative in many different groups. You may have many different nights of this process. This isn't something that happens in 4 weeks. My guess is from my work with strategic planning is year-long process. Can you expedite it in some cases? You could, but you may run the risk of leaving someone out, not having someone voices at the table, but ensuring that you have a comprehensive plan to ensure that you have all the stakeholders involved. As it relates to decision making in this process, it's really, once again, getting feedback from people around their experiences with the particular areas that of focus. Their experiences in this process of what they've experienced, whether their kids have experienced it or kids have experienced it, community members have experienced certain things. You want to compile all of that information. And I'm only saying this because I'm more than likely wouldn't be the person that lead it, given the size district that we have. We would more than likely want to use some level of a firm or something like that in the process, because I do want to be a participant as a superintendent as a part of this process, to also share my perspective and expertise in the groups that I would be a part of. So from that perspective, I'll be really, again, getting the feedback from everyone in the different groups, looking at our priority areas. And I think our current data would be brought into the space to help us kind of get to that space of understanding what are our core areas of focus, utilizing possibly our former strategic plan. There may be a need to just do some light shifts or changes as opposed to overhauling the entire strategic plan. There may be a lot of great things that have taken place in the prior strategic plan, but really leaning into some of those areas that we know have been a key struggle for us based on what the stakeholders are sharing with us. Just want to make sure I'm not missing anything here. goal setting and action planning process. From an action planning process based on the, say if we identify four key areas, core areas, there may be some key performance indicators that fall under each of those core areas. I know in the district that I'm currently in, our process, we actually had 21 key performance indicators. We had roughly 5 to 6 in each of the core areas. And within that, we established for each of those core areas, we established some action steps that we're going to take that are also now linked also to the continuous school improvement plans. So there's a direct link and connection, not only from your strategic planning process to the building level within their building continuous school improvement plans. So the action steps would be developed to support the key performance indicators. And those action plans are really developed by the use of the stakeholders. Some things may be more staff generated, some things may be more family, parent, or organizing generated, and then some things may be student driven and generated, as well as looking at the community being a part of that as well. I think you seek input by way of, I've used many different consensus processes in the past, whether that's thumbs up, fist to 5. We've also done where we've done dots to kind of get people to indicate some of their priorities in the system of consensus. So that's just a couple ways that we kind of went about it in our current, process. And I think that would be a great way to kind of have people visually see things in the process of consensus building. And then making sure that we have diverse stakeholders. That's really not only reaching out to families, but making sure that we're really looking at our student, demographics to have them a part of it, making sure that our parents are reflective of our demographics of students, making sure our staff, is reflective of that. And I know right now we don't have the same level of staffing that's identifiable by our student population, but ensuring that we have some representation across the board for all demographic groups, as well as different departments that exist within the school district.
Okay. We have been commissioned. Has everyone had an opportunity to ask the question? I believe they have. Do you have questions for us?
I do. You mind if I bring them?
Okay.
From your perspective, what are some key areas of growth that you've kind of seen that needs to take place from your perspective as a board?
I can answer from my vision. I think this community relies a lot on the numbers, and when a report card goes out, I think that they want to know why we've moved the needle, but why has it only gone so far? And I know a lot of that comes from communication. I know that this district is doing a lot of great stuff. I think the district has a lot of great plans and a lot of put in place. It's more about communicating to this community why we are where we are and why it's taking baby steps, because there are valid reasons for that. Obviously, bigger and better is always better, right? Bigger is always better. But yeah, that's kind of my take on it. Okay.
I think safety is a big issue in our community. Whether it's students not feeling safe in the classroom because of other students, or teachers not feeling safe in the classroom, or I'm sure you're aware of the incident that we had earlier this year with weapon in the school. I just hear a lot of the community just concerns around safety.
I will tell you, I have an opportunity to visit the schools weekly, and I take advantage of that because I don't work during the days. 99%, you know, I work. 99% of everything I see there is positive. Staff happy, teachers happy, kids happy, smiling. I got the chance to do High Five Friday the other day. And I think it's that 1% or less can stick out. We're a big city
Mhm.
in a small way.
Yeah.
Okay. We are a diverse city from East County all the way out to Gresham-Barlow High School. This is the most diverse community I have ever seen in my life.
I agree.
And it's an amazing community.
I can tell you, from living here, our demographics are shifting faster than the staff in
Yes.
our district. We're over 50% students of color, and look at our board. I'm the only person of color and the only bilingual person, as far as I know. Have you improved? Have you? So, I think we still need more representation of all of our student populations in our community. Like David said, we have a beautiful community, we have a very diverse community, and you saw it in our schools. And that's an area of growth when it comes to staff and board representation, because our families are there already.
I agree.
I'm gonna piggyback off of what Dr. Gomez said, because I think we're telling a little bit of our stories too. This is part of you getting to know us too.
Yeah.
So I've lived in this community most of my life, and it is a community that has experienced displacement across the board. Right, we have communities of color who have, Oregon's a very white state, right? Communities of color who have entered who did that not by choice.
Yep.
Right, they were displaced from their communities. We have a long-standing white community that's experiencing displacement too. That's a real thing. I will say, this is obviously from my perspective. There is a level of reconciliation within the community, meaning reconciling what those changes really mean, that hasn't happened. There's, as David indicated, this community celebrates itself. We love this community. People who are here love it. But there's pain underneath. As I'm sure you can imagine, my family and I have been a foster family for a long time. People, I think, realize that there is pain in pockets of the community without fully grasping what it means and unpacking all the layers of it. What I could say is, as David said, the community, we love this community. So for a community that is experiencing displacement, there's people do and love it here. We just have that chance to grow and heal in the way they're shooting the whole country needs to, right? Gresham's no different.
No.
I think, for one of mine, because I've been here a long time too, I went to schools here that before anybody really realized there were schools here. And, we don't tell our story as well as we should. And I know part of that is the changing environment, that the story leaps out before we've even halfway got a pencil and paper, and people don't use pencils anymore. And we are doing good things in our district, and we are addressing struggles, and we are looking for change, and we are looking at how do we improve. And it gets lost. And so it's a constant revisit of how are we telling our story, and telling it over and over again. Telling it one time maybe didn't reach everyone, and telling it again and engaging people in the telling of our story. I think we've, over the last few years, lost control of our story. And it's headlines in the media, because headline sells a paper. We need to sell our school district. We need to control the headline.
We are out of time.
Okay, yep, I was keeping track of that. So I think we are at time. We appreciate you coming in this evening. Hope you had a great time in our district yesterday,
I did.
and appreciate you very much. So, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rainey.
It's great to meet you. Thanks so much.
Rainey's sticking the red eye. Nice to meet you.
Oh, okay.
We hope you sleep on the plane. Have a safe flight.
Flight out tonight or?
12:45.
I assume it is colder.
Today.
Okay.
is a
Real full.
negative 35.
Oh,
So you won't complain about the wind here.
Okay.
I said, you'll always get a nice number. It's the best.
heard.
It is
I- I
very
got-
nice
Isn't it?
airport, and it's
Yeah, thank you.
beautiful.
I get there early just to
beautiful,
enjoy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, or they got good food too, so we get there early for that.
That too.
It's one of my favorite.
Yeah.
Airports, actually.
Oh, it's
They have
my
good
favorite.
food, you
It's
can
my
shop there
favorite.
if you want, you can.
Yes. I like it. I like it.
Okay.
Forgot my water bottle.
Do we go refill this? Do we recess between?
Should we go ahead and turn it off for a second?
Yes.
All right, yep, so we'll recess for 15 minutes. Till our next candidate comes in.
No, I'm gonna get our. Look at that. We're on screen too.
All right, nice to meet you.
See you again. So should we? Does it matter? It's getting so hot.
It's okay, yeah, it's warm. it's
Yeah,
open.
yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, I
Oh,
closed
you're
it
doing
today,
it.
We can get you a new water. We like your water.
Uh,
Oh, thank you. Are these both the same thing or two pages?
Just two sides.
It's two
Okay.
pages, so.
Two pages.
And they're not in order.
They're not in any
They're
order,
not-
so I can track it
I've
down.
got it. Yeah, so let me do a little intro thing.
Okay.
So good evening and welcome to the Gresham-Barlow Board of Education, January 22nd, superintendent interviews. As a reminder that we mentioned this earlier, but the board interviewed 7 superintendent candidates in a special work session held January 11th. Following those interviews, the board narrowed the candidate pool to 3 finalists for the superintendent position. Finalists spent a day in the district, touring schools and meeting with students, staff, families, and community members on January 21st, 2025. The board will hold final interviews with candidates during this meeting. After the interviews, the board will convene an executive session to deliberate. And then when we leave executive session, we'll make a decision potentially tonight. So this evening we have with us Dr. Angela Freeman, welcome. And we do have some questions. We will go around the room and ask them. There may be a couple of them that are worded a little bit differently. We've changed some a little bit tonight. But I think you'll be able to work with that. Did she get the new sheet?
That, yeah.
Is that the new sheet? Okay, so we should be good on that. So we will ask the questions, move around the table and then come back for second round of questions. And I don't keep a timer, but we'll just reach the end and then we'll say we're about finished. So I get to start. That's the board chair. Yesterday, you spent a full day in the district visiting schools and meeting with stakeholders. Provide your reflections and highlights of the day. And based on what you saw and heard, do you have any accolades or concerns?
I'm so glad you asked that question because I wasn't sure what you were gonna ask today, and I was just asking Brian if would have a chance to kind of read my own thoughts about that at the end, but you asked the question, so here we go. I will start at the part where my reflections are. I learned so much during my visits to schools yesterday, along with my chance to listen to staff and to community, and I was reminded that we still have work to do. We must ensure that our schools are safe and supportive environments for our students to thrive physically and emotionally. We need to ensure that our students have rigorous work that provides them with challenge. I've got to meet with our high school students and they are actually asking for it, for rigor. Making sure that we keep spaces like libraries and class sizes in mind when we're considering budget cuts. Engaging our parents who are asking to be involved, to be volunteers in our schools. We actually had a really good conversation about how we could promote volunteer opportunities in our districts and at schools. And one of our schools, Hall Elementary, the principal is doing some really great work about training our parent volunteers once they come to the school, so they know exactly what to do when they get there and how to be proactive. A parent approached me afterwards and was saying, how can we spread that around the district? How can we systematize that, the good work that's going on in schools? Our parents want to be involved. They know that a budget crunch is coming and are willing to roll up their sleeves and help and get to work. One thing that made me a little bit sad, our students in high school have a lot of stress weighing on them. And it's not only the safety, but it's about the academic pressures that are on some of our kiddos. Along with everything else that they are doing and involved in. They have full days with sports or other activities, along with trying to keep up their GPAs. One of the questions I asked them was, well, 2 questions I asked the students was, what gives you hope? And what are some things that students worry about? And the worry piece came up with these academics. If I'm not getting a 4.0, I really worry about that. So I think we need to really remember as adults that it's easy to forget that students carry the weight of the world on their shoulders and that they need to be reminded to give themselves grace. The short sessions really affirmed for me the commitment of Gresham community to our district, and that we can solve big problems if we have the space to talk about ideas. As superintendent, I will do more of that, just listening. They ask to be heard and to be listened to. I'll lead a process that helps us to develop a strategic plan so that we're all working together toward a common goal. I'll continue to strengthen our partnerships with law enforcement and fire departments to ensure that our community knows exactly what to do in a crisis. That came up a lot with our community sessions. How are we going to keep our schools safe? How are you going to keep our kiddos safe? It was a repeated theme. So just really assuring our community, building our trust back. Talked a little bit about when I was at elementary principal and what Trust Mountain. I don't know if any of you were in elementary schools, but it takes a long time to climb and get to the top, but it's really easy to lose it very quick. So I think that we are on this path to climb to the top of Trust Mountain again in this district with our parents and our community. And I think that we can get there. Our parents are looking for, our community is looking for that olive branch and that opportunity to be able to be heard. That's what I'll say about that. I know we're on, there's a lot of questions here, so, okay. Yeah, all right.
As superintendent, you will need to proactively address and support the shifting racial and socioeconomic demographics within our schools. What specific strategies will you implement to ensure that all students and staff, regardless of their background, receive equitable opportunities and resources? How will you measure progress and ensure accountability?
Right, that's a really big question. So let's start with the first part. Proactively address and support the shifting racial socioeconomic demographics in our schools. I'm a firm believer our kids don't change, or they shouldn't change. Kids are kids. It's the adults in the system that needs to make the shifts and the changes to adapt to our students that come to us. So whether they have a different socioeconomic background or racial identity or background, it is our job to be the learners and to adapt our communities to be able to serve them best. So strategies that I would implement to ensure that all students, regardless of their backgrounds, receive equitable opportunities and resources. I think educating and training our staff who, I believe it's 80 to 90% of our staff are not people of color, so they are identify as white, and more than half of our students identify as students of color. So making sure that the staff that we have, that we are making sure that they understand the needs of the different populations that are coming to our schools and that they're prepared with the toolbox to be able to support them. That takes professional development. We've done a lot of professional development with our teachers, and I think that we have room to grow with professional development for our building principals. I may have talked about this in another interview. I've had about 15 by now, so if I'm repeating myself, I'm apologizing, but talking about really lifting and building up our building leaders as instructional leaders to continue that work with our teachers in the buildings. And the last part, measuring progress to ensure accountability. Measuring progress. And I'm trying to see what you want me to measure progress on, if it's receiving the equitable opportunities and resources, or if we're looking at academic achievement. I once read a book by Zaretta Hammond, and she talks about we're not being culturally responsive unless our Black and Brown students are reading and writing. So our test scores right now, all students we're woefully behind. So we're not being culturally responsive as a district right now because our test scores show that we are not closing that achievement gap, nor are we achieving high expectations in reading, writing, and mathematics. Not only for our Black and Brown students, but for all students. Our scores are so dismal at this point. It's time to start. And I think I talked with you about that, start at the foundation level as well. So looking at progress, our state tests are one way. It's a tiny snapshot once a year, but we have formative assessments in place with iReady and DIBELS for mathematics and reading to make sure that we are knowing where our kids are. When I was a principal in Westland Wilsonville and in Ridgefield, one thing I would always say is, do you know where your kids are? And our teachers would know, would know exactly what that meant. I know where my kids are. You should be able to walk into a classroom, ask as a parent, ask your teacher, what level is my child reading? What can I do with them at home to be able to get them to the next level? The only way a teacher is going to know is to be engaged with that student every day, listening to them read, watching them write, giving them feedback. So I would say measuring progress means that we're looking at data as a district. We're looking at data as teachers working with one another within a building and across grade levels to ensure that there's seamless movement between grade levels for students so that they're not getting the same instruction over and over again, but we're building on what they had the year before. It's that teaching and learning cycle. If some of you are familiar with that. So you teach it, you assess, you see what students know, you make a plan, and then you teach it again.
All right, so Director Rickman.
Okay.
Do you
How
want
do you-
Oh,
We got
sorry, no,
Yeah.
yes, and it's.
Okay, sorry.
How do you intend to establish clear accountability structures within our district to ensure that all stakeholders, including staff, teachers, administrators, and students, are held to high standards of performance and conduct?
I think we have, there are some structures in place already that I think we need to actually use, I guess I should say. So it's not the structures that may not be in place. I think it's the consistency of the use of those structures. For students, I know we have the discipline handbook, which really clearly lays out proactive strategies to ensure that students are looked at as individuals and that every person in the building and in the community has a part in making sure that that student gets the supports that they need so that they can either behave appropriately or learn the rules or learn what, how to do school so that they can re-enter the community in a safe way. And that there's accountability structures, consequences, when students are making poor choices. And consequences don't always have to be suspension or ISS or, that can look many different ways. I know as a parent, sometimes the worst consequence for my kid would be a phone call home. And they'd be like, oh, please just suspend me. Or, like, don't call my mom. So it really is individualized for each student. I think for our staff and our teachers, we have a responsibility. I, as a superintendent, would have the responsibility of ensuring that every person, every adult that our student interacts with is an expert in their field, is safe for our kids to be around, and supportive. And so there is an accountability structure with our evaluation systems, with our grievance processes, there's board policy around how adults in our district behave and the kinds of processes, the due process that they get if they make a mistake as well. In human resources, I see that all the time, making sure that our adults are also treated with the same dignity and respect that we give our students, which is offering them a chance to get better, right? Allowing them to know what the mistake was that they made, so we give them the support that they need to be able to be a productive staff person in our district. And then I think you mentioned stakeholders as well, which is very interesting. Oh, administrators have the same systems. And I think, our community, while I believe everyone should be treated with dignity and respect, I think that, and that we have a public forum for people to voice their concerns. There is a professional and respectful way to have discourse and to disagree. And so I would definitely promote and hold a high standard to having respectful disagreements. I think they're necessary, and I would love to hear when folks may not agree with with me. It helps me to either believe deeper about my own beliefs or change my mind. So I really need people to disagree with me sometimes so that I can challenge my own thinking. But there's a way to do that that is, that leaves the other person feeling heard and respected. So that would be my strategy for stakeholders. Thank you. Sorry.
All right, so Dr. Clarence.
School safety encompasses a wide range of challenges from addressing bullying and mental health to preparing for emergencies and fostering a school environment. How do you personally define safety in a school district? How would you collaborate with staff, families, and community partners to create and sustain a culture of safety in the district? And what metrics would you use to assess and improve safety over time?
Yeah, this question came up a lot yesterday. And it's just so big. So one of the things that I discussed with a parent was when we're talking about physical safety, that's something that you can touch, for lack of a better word. We see it, someone got in a fight, someone is hurt, someone brought a gun to school, those are things that we know. And it's easy to kind of apply a simple solution, to a complex problem. I think the things that we will take more listening and discussion are those other types of safety, which is that emotional safety, the mental safety. We have trans students who are reporting more thoughts of suicide than any other population in our district right now. That to me it's a big deal, and it's a safety concern. We have students who don't want to come to school because it doesn't feel safe to go to the bathroom. Maybe there's bullying that happens behind the scenes that we don't see. How do we address that? I think the way that I know that we have addressed and that we need to continue to build up is building the trust for people to say something when things happen. There's no way that that adults in the building can know all of the interactions that happen with students behind the scenes. So we have to build that community of trust where someone or that culture of community and belonging, that students want to be there. They want to help and love and support their peers, even when they don't agree with each other. So creating avenues for students and families to be able to call, report, and tell so that we can have students feel safe in every way. How do we measure that? Well, there are surveys. There's always surveys for sure. And I think for the easy one, not easy, but the one that we can see fights, are we having less fights in school? Are we reporting less referrals? We have those data systems that kind of give the hard data. We can definitely we have a system already set up right now in our district where we have the district safety committee that looks at, and we just negotiated this in the contract, where we have building student conduct committees that will look at the data, the referral data within their buildings, and then they will submit that to the district safety committee, where we will then take a look and see what are the hot pockets, what kind of support does that building need. There's been X amount of fights at this building. How can we provide, more staff or training or, depending on what it is. As far as the emotional safety, I think really investing in our counseling and our social emotional learning for students, to be able to, maybe talking to our counselors, how many students are coming to our counselors to report thoughts of, unsafe thoughts. Counselors within our elementary schools to talk about students who may be experiencing trauma or report DHS calls that principals unfortunately sometimes have to make, could be another way to measure those. But I think looking at the whole picture, and I'm glad you brought that up, there's a lot of definitions of safety. So I always ask that question when a parent says my kid is not safe at school. I will give one more example. I know I'm running out of time, but this will be quick. When I was principal in Weston Wilsonville, we were we were one of the, well, it was my first year there, and the decision was made that all students deserve to go to their home school. So they dismantled all of the rooms, what are they called, behavior classrooms, which they would bus students from other schools to go to one behavior classroom. So that was dismantled. And parents had a hard time with that, and so did teachers. They were anxious because it's something they had never done before. They believed that students who experienced big behaviors were getting better care outside of their classroom than they would inside of their classroom. So we took the time to make sure that every teacher felt like they were prepared to love and support every student that came into the classroom. But we had, when the big behaviors came up from the parents, actually, we had a big forum and we talked about what is safety? What does that mean? You know, safety for you. What about the student who is hitting? You know, the one who's hitting all the time. What does safety look like for him? And the parents of that student had a lot to say. My student feels like they don't get invited to birthday parties. You know, when they come to school, they feel like everybody looks at them like they're a monster. I mean, it's a perspective that we don't always hear, but we were able to work together as a community so that each of us saw each parent as human, you know, and as a parent. So I think it's really important to just really define safety. Appreciate the question.
Briefly, can you talk
Sure.
about how you collaborate with community partners?
Oh, is that? I'm sorry. It was a long question. Community partners are super important. Depending on, I mean, we have about 100 in our district. So there's lots of community partners, people who work with different populations that have that personal relationship with our families. And so super crucial to have someone who our families trust and confide in, to be able to have a pulse on what's going on in the community that we may not know, or that community may not trust us enough yet to come directly to us to say. I know we have liaisons within our district that we pay, so not necessarily community partners, but they also reach out to our families that might have difficulty communicating in any kind of way with our schools. So I think I would definitely use our community partners to get the word out and to get information.
All right, Director Ligotvich.
I ask the second question.
Okay.
How will you establish open and transparent communication channels to inform and engage parents about pressing educational priorities and challenges within the Gresham-Barlow School District? And then follow up, how will they be involved in critical decision-making of the district?
That's a great question. There are some bones already in the district. We talked about this a little bit yesterday in my session. Key communicators meetings. I just started attending those this year, and I think it's a really great opportunity for the community to come in, hear what's going on in the district, but also adding a layer to that would be to hear from our community the concerns or the ideas that they may have on how to make our district better. One of the concerns that came from a community member yesterday was, I feel like I go to these key communicators meetings and then nothing happens after that. How do we make sure that there's some follow through? So I offered that, well, if it's just me giving you communication, there's really not a lot of follow through. You could probably read that in a newsletter. But if there is an agenda or an objective, or if there's something that I really want to know, or a decision that needs to be made in the district, it's a perfect opportunity to be able to have that dialogue and come up with some solutions to problems that we might have. So I think those meetings could be repurposed to get input from our community members and to be able to follow up and have them have a piece of the action. Or who just asked that question? Oh, here it is. Yes. And how will they be involved in the critical decision making of the district? So I think we can get survey burnout sometimes. So I am not someone who wants to necessarily send 100 surveys out to parents. But I also think that sometimes that's the easiest way to get some quick feedback. Critical decisions, I think face to face. I mean, yesterday I was so not impressed. It was affirming for me that when you just listen and you ask people, and we did that at the safety summit as well. People were so appreciative to just come out. I think we can get blocked and paralyzed as leaders to think, oh, nobody's going to want to talk to us. Nobody's going to want to come out. We had lots of parents and community members that actually want to have a voice. So I think making sure that we have those pathways and opportunities for people to just come together in person and talk it out. I think that as a leader, I need to definitely have clear boundaries about what am I going to do with the input. So it's not that I'm just asking for you to give me feedback. I need you, this is the decision that needs to be made. Here's how I'm going to use the input that you give. I'm the final person that's going to decide, and here's how I'm going to use your input to decide that. Or if this is something that, it's a community decision, and whatever you all decide, as a community, I'm going to make it happen. There's several different kinds of decisions, that I think we can make. And it's really important to be clear with the people who are taking their time to give the input, about what's going to happen with that input.
I'll ask the first question there. In what ways have students and families changed over the course of your career? What challenges and opportunities do those changes present to public education? Touched on it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like students and families haven't really changed much. I mean, I guess the society and I think the issues in our communities have changed. But moms, dads, we still love our kids, our parents still want the best for our kids. That has not changed. I honestly believe that everybody who is a caregiver wants better for our kids than we have for ourselves. That has not changed. I don't care what you look like, how much money you have. I think that the challenges that are facing us right now, I mean, specifically maybe in our area, the Portland and Multnomah County kind of area, like there's not affordable housing. We have more families who have more needs. I know that the pandemic that keeps getting brought up, but I think that we are all, from adult to child, are for the first time in a very long time, all grieving at the same time. We're all recovering at the same time. Oftentimes you have, maybe it's just children, or maybe it's just adults, or maybe it's one group. But when you as an adult are trying to go to the counselor to get help for yourself, and the counselor needs counseling, it's just like, we are at a point in time that's very unique, where everybody needs support. So I think that's changed. Our teachers are feeling like they don't have the tools to help our students who are going, and families who are going through traumatic experiences. I heard that yesterday. We talked about secondary trauma in our union meeting, where our teachers are bearing the weight and the burdens of some of the families' issues that are happening, and they aren't trained or don't have the capacity, because guess what? They're going through trauma too, from their own lives, or maybe they've lost folks, or all the things that happened during the pandemic. So I think that as a district, if we can just, first of all, acknowledge that, and acknowledge that all of us as humans are going through this grieving process together, and to help and support one another, rather than pointing a finger at whose job it is to support and take care of whom. If we can come together and just say, you know what, I'm going to give you a little grace today because I need it to, Yeah, I think we have an opportunity. I said a lot of the challenges, but I think we have an opportunity to rebrand, rebrand education. Bring the joy back in what it means to be an educator. Bring the joy. We talked a little bit about this in our teachers meeting yesterday. They were asking, teachers are leaving, you know, at high rates. I don't remember the numbers, but they're getting out of here in their first year. And I said, you know, but there's some people, a lot of you are staying. We don't really tell that story. Like, why are you still here? Because it's a really awesome profession. It's a really awesome thing to do. You get to impact the lives of so many humans on a day-to-day basis in such a powerful way. And we need to tell that story. It's hard. Absolutely, it's hard. You know, am I tired at the end of the day? 100%. But is it worth it? All the time. All the time.
Okay. We've got a little bit of time. I'm gonna work through a little bit of round 2 questions. So let's
Okay.
back and,
Oh, round 2. Okay. That's the second. Okay. I'm
Yeah.
like, round 2. Okay.
Yeah. So from, I get to ask the question. Can you provide your perspective as to the proper relationship between the Board of Education and the superintendent as it relates to consequential decisions? What decisions do you bring to the board for action? What decisions do you make with your team and then inform the board? So board engagement.
Yeah. And I talked a little bit about this in our first interview. I think we are a team. Hope they believe that too, that we all have our strengths and our gifts and our talents, and that you all ran to be a part of the school board because you want to make a difference in the lives of children. That being said, you don't have time to be a teacher or to be in the classroom or to be in schools all the time. If you know, you also have full-time jobs, you have families. So I think my role on the board or as a team member is to make sure that you are aware of anything that's out of the ordinary that might be coming your way. Make sure that you're educated, so to speak, on any of the education ease that might be coming down the pike, or acronyms that are ever changing in our profession. Preparing you for any folks that might be coming to speak at board meetings or any issues that might be arising, so that you can make informed decisions. Say there's nothing worse, but it doesn't feel great when you're surprised with questions in the grocery store, or, you know, at I would assume at a soccer game or at a water polo game or something, when you're sitting there trying to enjoy your family and someone comes up and has this big, hey, did you hear what happened at such and such? So trying to make sure that I am being proactive in communication about things that you might want to be aware of, while at the same time not overburdening you with the operations of the district. There are things that myself and my team are responsible for. Processes and procedures around evaluations, teachers' evaluations. There are students that make bad choices literally every single day. I can guarantee you do not want to see every referral that comes across the principal's desk. But when there's something that is out of the ordinary, a fire truck that's outside of a school, or a police car that might be driving in the neighborhood or parked outside of the front of the school, it might be worth, hey, don't worry, a student fell out the swing, everything's fine. You might get calls about that. It's in your neighborhood or something like that, that you might just want to have a heads up about. Tell me the second part of that. What decisions do you bring to the board for action? I think there's policies around a lot of the decisions that you're going to need. I don't know them all, but I know some of the things that we brought to the board for action would be approving personnel, licensed personnel. It's first thing on my mind because I'm in HR. Any money decisions over, I want to say $50,000. This is me and my policy brain. You need to make sure that you're knowing how much we're spending when it's over a certain amount, and I think you all set that amount. So decisions that are guided by policy, I guess I can just kind of generalize it in that way. Those are the kinds of things that would need to come to the board to be approved.
So Director Lieberman.
As I was looking already.
Yeah.
It's a short.
Okay, question number 2 for me, how would you respond to parent complaints about teacher performance?
Yeah. Coincidentally, I get those now, and I'm not even the superintendent. There was a parent yesterday at one of the meetings and one of the community meetings, yeah, who had a complaint about a classroom and a teacher, and so always careful to just listen and affirm and believe what parents are saying. And then ask if there's any support that I can provide or connect them to make sure that they're getting their problem solved at the lowest possible level. So in this case, it was a student in a classroom where the parent felt that the student was unsafe. So I made sure to direct one of the parents to, we happen to have the director of schools there on site. I'm like, hey, go talk to Sarah. So just making sure that they feel connected to the right space to get their problem solved. That could also be, well, if it's just a parent complaint about a student, it really should start with the principal, quite frankly, unless it's already been to that level. Informing them of the proper chain of the grievance process, so to speak. Making sure if they have talked to the principal already, have they, gone to talk to the next level up? Are you aware that there is a process? Let me direct you to the website so that you can follow those processes and procedures. If none of that works, please email me. And last night I was like, you've got my email. I work in the district. Email me and I'll make sure that I follow up and connect somebody. Connect you with someone who can help you. So I don't want to take power away from the folks that are in the roles that we hired them for. I think it can be very tricky when a superintendent or an executive director of schools, for example, tries to take care, or a board, tries to handle situations that should really start at the ground level. And folks just know that they can just come to me, and then I have a lot of work. It's like, oh, why would I go to the principal when I can just go to Angela and she'll get it taken care of? So it's really important to honor the structure and respect the leadership that we've hired folks to do.
Okay, Dr. Barnes.
Describe a problem you face in your current or previous position. Outline the specific steps you took to resolve the issue. Highlighting the details of your decision-making process and any innovative solutions you implement.
Okay. Problem I faced in my current or previous position. Problem. Specific steps you took to resolve the issue. I guess the most recent, we just settled the contract. There were a lot of problems there that we overcame. And I think I'm pretty proud of when we came to points in our negotiations where we felt kind of stuck and tangled. We came back to the table, and Chris was there too, where we just we're really honest with each other about the things that we could and that we couldn't do. I'm not sure if that gives you what you want, though. I think the decision-making process.
Whatever.
Okay. Yeah, I think innovative solutions. Gosh, I just can't give myself credit for being innovative, but it's not really innovative. I think building relationships, especially in the negotiations process, and we had interest-based bargaining with OSEA, and we had the position bargaining with GBEA, and both were different, but required that trust building and that relationship. So with the GBEA's negotiations coming up, it was really important to start very early. So we didn't just jump in as a team to negotiations, but we started really wanting to develop relationships with our teachers union, get to know them as people. Making sure that people knew that it was a collaborative process and that we were in it together. It's not just the teacher's contract, but it's a partnership between both sides. And, you know, we made decisions to eat together. I mean, those small things that we do that just keep us human. And I think that it really enhanced the process and helped us to get to resolutions a lot sooner to where we weren't. I think we understood each other a lot better and that we could understand each other's sides a lot better. We didn't get everything that we wanted, no, neither side did, but I think we came to a place, I know we came to a place that we settled the contract that we could both agree to.
Director Lickett.
Question. Do I have to read it off the way it is?
No, she's got at least the part of it, so you can, as long as you don't drastically change it, you're okay.
Okay. This is coming from the Oregon Moms Union when I was running. I guess I can read it the way it is.
Okay.
How would you initiate a thorough analysis of the current state testing data, pinpointing specific areas of weakness and disparities among different student groups, and then address the identified achievement gaps? And the last candidate, I'll add what I said. What they are looking for is, where are the disparities, even though they are going up in baby steps? Why are they not going up higher?
Yeah.
And they want to know what we're going to do to get them higher. We understand where it is, but they're looking for a bigger jump.
Okay, I'm gonna take a stab at it. Initiate a thorough analysis. So the state provides a lot of data for us, which is great. So a thorough analysis, we have our curriculum and instruction directors who can disaggregate anything that you throw at them. So the data is not the problem. We can tell you who, how much, when, and where. What we don't always know how to do as educators is how to use that data in a way that helps us to inform instruction. So what I would like to do, and I think we're doing a little bit better, is to teach and train our instructional leaders or our principals in this case, how to unpack the data, targets specific populations who looks like they're struggling in whatever area. And then not only say, okay, our kids in this population are not reading well, but asking the questions why. So that qualitative data that comes along with it. And then that leads to creating plans with teachers creating lesson plans in partnership with the special education teachers and our ELL teachers, especially for our students who are newcomers and English may not be their first language, to develop a lesson plan that has entry points for all students to be able to learn and grow. And then comes the monitoring, the formative assessments that we talked about. Where are your kids at, right? Monitoring on a 2 to 3 week basis to make sure that kids are learning what you want them to learn, whatever that specific phonics, and they don't know their sounds. Then maybe at kindergarten, you might have a 2 week time period that you're pulling 2 or 3 kids out that were in that specific group to make sure that they're getting their sounds down. Once they're done with that, then we test them again, and then we move on to the next skill. I think you had said, why isn't that closing very fast, or is that what they want to know?
Why is it not jumping?
Jumping,
Well,
yeah, I
Why
think,
why is the gap not closing? I think that's right.
I guess when they look at it, they're looking at like, we're at 84%. Why didn't we go to 89% over last year? Why, you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
That's not what the question says. The question says, and then address the identified achievement gaps.
Mhm.
Okay,
And
so
then-
then yes, this way.
Yeah, and address the gaps. And so we have to, I think, have some real conversations too about who is struggling, sometimes teachers and our communities don't want to. It's hard to look at real data and not take it personal, I guess, as a teacher, right? Our Black kids are failing, right? We can say that, and it's like, oh no. Which one kid, who are the kids? They don't come to school enough, or, there's always some kind of detour around some of our populations, rather than just saying, okay, this is a problem, whatever the reason is for this population who is not successful right now. We have to kind of unpack that and look at it. So I think sometimes maybe why it's not jumping so fast is that we can often discount data without seeing the data is just sometimes a small part of the big pie. I think as educators, we do a really good job of just saying, oh, that's because they're never here. Oh, that's because, and then we don't do anything about it. We end up stuck. So if we can get to a culture where we can look at data and take it as that face value, and then act on it as if it were true. Even if you don't believe it's true, act as if it's true. What would you do if it was? Then I think we can make, greater gains. But I'm not sure that there's a magic way to make achievement gap close. Otherwise, that would have happened 150 years ago.
So direct predecessor.
Oh. Dr. Freeman, what is your approach to strategic planning? How do you lead the process? Who's involved in your visioning and strategic planning, goal setting, action planning? How do you seek input, build consensus among diverse stakeholders? So just talking about strategic planning.
Yeah, for sure. So I went through this process in Reynolds School District, and it takes a good amount of time. I think it took us almost a year, but it was pretty thorough. We started with listening sessions with all stakeholders. So similar to kind of what we did yesterday, it wouldn't all be in one day. Thank you. It would be stretched out over time. And we would pose specific questions and have some guardrails around the kind of questions that we would ask. What's really important to you in a district? What is your vision? What is your dreams for your students if it's a parent group? For students, might asking them what is an ideal school setting look like for you? So coming up with questions that really get at the core beliefs of our community and what they really want to see in a K-12 education. Taking that information and then when we were doing it in Reynolds, we kind of did circles around found common themes. And then we brought that to our district office and we talked with our district leaders. Our school board was always involved in each one of, so one of you would be at a community meeting and listening in and developing those. From that, the district level would have their own groups to disaggregate and find common themes, and then we would develop pillars, or that's overused, but that's what they were. Pillars of, okay, safety was a theme. Student achievement was something that was really important. You all have developed your own, goals, belonging. And then we would use those to develop an action plan. And so that's where our building leaders would come together and we try to work backwards and set a timeline for what kind of data we would need to collect. How do we know when we've got there, right? And then making sure before I move on. Action plans with goals, timelines, SMART goals for, gosh, I haven't used that term in a long time. SMART, measurable, attainable, and time bound. That our district leaders would put in place. Then that goes to you all. You would look at it, approve it, add, subtract, and we would refine it, put it in a beautiful binder, and then present it to the community, and everybody would see their part in a strategic plan that is such a truncated, small little version of what a bigger process looks like. I actually thought doing that, going through that process really helped everyone to anchor themselves in what we truly believe as a district. I think right now in Gresham, I think we have the portrait of a graduate, which I think is awesome. But when you ask, if you were to ask people in the community or your teachers or your principals, like, hey, what are we all about here? You know, where are we trying to go? What are you, it's, you would get some different answers. So my vision is that you could ask anyone in the community, any teacher, any student at any time, like, where are we all trying to move together? And they would have the same general answer. You know, we want all of our, you know, I'm trying to graduate with as many choices as I possibly can. That's great. I want to make sure that, you know, I can be whatever I want to be. So we would just really have a grounding to build some collective efficacy around something that we can all rally behind.
I believe we have reached the end of our questions. We have a
Part
few
two,
more.
part three.
Yeah. Any quick questions for us?
How many minutes do I have?
About.
One.
Oh,
I would do, we went a little bit, so let's do 3 minutes. Yeah, 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay, I did write my question. Okay, I have one hopefully quick question. There will be hard work to do in the next biennium. I'm sure you all know this. How will the board partner with myself and district staff to advocate for more resources?
Is that a rhetorical or?
You said how, I said how will the board partner with the district, myself, everyone to advocate for more resources for it?
So it's gonna be engagement by the board, totally, engagement at multiple levels.
Yeah.
And with legislators with, appropriate district level folks, as well as explain to the community options that we will have and options that we may not have. So that we are the ones that should provide the accurate information to the community, not sometimes the headlines.
Yeah.
So it's going, but it's also gonna take an understanding. There's a long path to this. There are things we have to do immediately and things that will be 1 and 2 years out. And making sure the board understands the immediate and the long term.
Yeah, I would say the legislative engagement is part of the role, and we do a lot of that through SBA. But the other side is building faith. You touched on it, I think. Community faith in what public education is doing, what Gresham-Barlow is doing specifically. We're probably a long way out from some of the local resources that other districts might have, like levies. But community faith is so critical.
Yeah.
We have a business community that has a legislative background. You talked about our CEO of our chamber, who used to be the Speaker of the House. We have a lot of business advocates for our school that also have a lot of legislative stretch and that are more than willing to get involved. We just have to tap that.
And I would add partnering with neighboring school boards so that we have one voice, since we all want the same thing for our kids and not working in isolation or in silos. So hopefully aligning our priorities gives us a stronger voice.
That's what I mean. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Unless I have any more time, which I think I do, but. No. I'll send it in an email. Just keeps checking. Thank you so much. It was good to see you. Yes. You all have a long night. I'll take this water so. And then there's. Yeah, good to see you. Good to see you again. Have a good night. Sarah, I'll take your hand. Good to see you too. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so do you want to take a small
break?
break? Yeah, take a little break. Let's get live, just a second.
Hello, hello. Hi.
Welcome, Sadie.
Hello. No worries, don't circle. Come back. Welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Good to see you.
I wondered if I was gonna need my glasses.
Good thing you brought them.
All right, good evening and welcome. We are back with the Gresham-Barlow Board of Education, January 22nd, 2025 board work session. Just a little bit of update. The board interviewed 7 superintendent candidates in a special work session held January 11th, 2025. Following those interviews, the board narrowed the candidate pool to 3 finalists for the superintendent position. Finalists spent a day in the district touring schools and meeting with students, staff, families, and community members on January 21st, 2025. The board is holding final interviews with candidates during this meeting. After the interviews, the board will convene an executive session to deliberate. And then afterwards, if we decide to make a decision tonight, we will come out of executive session and return back to the work session. We've spoken to a couple of candidates tonight, and right now we welcome Dr. Tracy Klinger. And the format is we have some questions that the board will be asking as we go around. I believe you have a copy of that. And so we'll ask the questions once and then we'll come back for the second round of questions. And if there's time at the end, you get a little bit of time to ask us any questions.
Perfect.
So with that, if I've said the same thing over and over, I think I'm good.
Good.
Okay, all right.
Good job.
So, good evening, welcome. I get to start with the first question.
All right.
Yesterday, you spent a full day in the district visiting schools and meeting with stakeholders. Provide your reflections and highlights of the day. And based on what you saw and heard, do you have any accolades or concerns?
Yesterday was an amazing day. It was very full, and I felt really just honored to be able to spend some time in our schools and meet with different student groups. I was able to visit Springwater Trail High School in Dexter McCarty, as well as East Gresham. And in that time, I had some time to chat with students. I had an interesting conversation with Springwater Trail High School students around cell phone policy and kind of what that looks like. And some of that was really insightful and intriguing. I had some 5th graders at East Gresham ask me, what tidbits they needed to know for their life, from education, what I need them to know. So that was rewarding as well. And just in visiting our schools, I just see the level of commitment of our staff. I saw students actively learning and really got to see a lot of the initiatives and things that we've been working on over time in action. And so that was not a surprise to me because I'm in our schools regularly, and yet it was just fun to kind of have a different perspective walking in. In terms of our community meetings yesterday, I found myself really invigorated and motivated for the work ahead. In meeting with staff, very transparent conversations around concerns that they have, challenges with behavior and social emotional learning. Also, some celebrations around some things that are going well. And so the conversations were really wide open. The format allowed for that, and I thought that was exciting. There was also some great conversation with families and community members last night. We had a really good turnout. We ended up having to break them up into 2 different spaces. And so that really led to more engagement, and our community really does want to engage, and they really do have questions that they want answers to and have solutions to offer us as well. And so through all of that, there was a lot of just thinking and processing last night. But what I took away from that is how important our schools are to our community. I understood that before, but I heard that loud and clear. I also showed some appreciation to the people that were there because we haven't always had the opportunity to engage with the community around a superintendent hire, and their willingness to put in that time and show up and really have those deeper conversations was really important. So lots of good things yesterday.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Gomez.
As superintendent, you will need to proactively address and support the shifting racial and socioeconomic demographics within our schools. What specific strategies will you implement to ensure that all students and staff, regardless of their background, receive equitable opportunities and resources? How will you measure progress and ensure accountability?
So I think this is a question that is weighing really heavily on people right now, and we're hearing from our community. It surfaced itself last night in our conversations as well. We have a very diverse community, and that's part of what makes it so beautiful. And there's a lot of opportunity to really expand knowledge and expand understanding across some of that difference. We have many students and families that are in fear right now, and our responsibility is really about how do we continue to provide that safe and welcoming environment for all of our students and provide supports and connections to resources if that's what a family needs. And really look at how we support them in lots of different ways. When I think about equitable opportunities, some of that is really around how we decide to utilize some of our funding, different programs that we put in place. I feel like DLI is a really great example of a very strategic instructional initiative that we put in place to support emerging multilingual students and support a culturally diverse group of families in our community that really leads to stronger outcomes, because we do have disparate outcomes. When we really dig into our data, our outcomes can be predictable based on race, based on language ability, based on special education are really the things that stand out. And so we have work to do there and a lot of monitoring to do in terms of how we measure what we're doing, pay attention to what we're doing, adjust what we're doing to really meet the outcomes that we need and make sure that they're equitable across our system.
Okay, Director Rubin.
Mr. Cleaner, how do you intend to establish clear accountability structures within our district to ensure that all stakeholders, including staff, teachers, administrators, and students, are held to high standards of performance and conduct?
I think it starts with having clear expectations. And once you have those clear expectations, they have to be communicated. And most oftentimes it has to be communicated more than once and in lots of different ways. And so once you have those clear expectations, it's really about follow through and asking reflective questions and monitoring the work that people are doing. And that's true for all of the groups there, staff, teachers, administrators, and students. We have, we're struggling with some clarity around some of that, I feel like right now, in terms of behavioral expectations, also around instructional expectations. And I think that's an area where we can really be working to have that high level. I think sometimes we, as a system and as humans, scaffold things or try to, give people a break and kind of reduce our expectations to kind of meet people more where they're at. And really what we need to do is hold those high expectations and support people in reaching them. And so it's really about how do we kind of provide that scope of support for different folks, different students, staff, in terms of what they need. I also believe that people need feedback. They need some opportunity to reflect, and they need some opportunity to grow and change some things. And so I see overall, when you're thinking about accountability structures and you're thinking about staff as well as students, those are some things that are really important in that work.
Okay. Dr. Jeff, that's fine.
School safety encompasses a wide range of challenges, from addressing bullying and mental health to preparing for emergencies and fostering a school environment. How do you personally define safety in a school district? How would you collaborate with staff, families, and community partners to create and sustain a culture of safety in the district? And what metrics would you use to assess and improve safety over time?
So safety is something that we have to be continually striving to improve. And when I do think about safety, there's obviously the physical safety, but I mean, as the board has had conversations around your board conditions, even, there's other layers of safety as well. There's emotional safety, there's that intellectual safety, there's that ability to be able to feel comfortable participating in class. All of those things really come into play. I think the things that really stand out right now around safety are about emotional safety and physical safety. We know that we've experienced a lot of threats in our community. We have strong practice around how to respond to those and investigate those. We have a lot of support in doing that. But it's scary. And so when we think about how we prepare for emergencies and when we're, you know, kind of addressing some of those things, some of it is about awareness. We want our systems to be predictable. We want people to know what to do when something's happening. And as a part of that, what we've learned, and I would say the hard way this year, is that communication is a really important part of that. And so how do we figure out how to provide timely but accurate information to folks to help put them to ease, help them feel like they've been supported and communicated with, provide them with facts, so there's not, you know, some of the things that are, you know, floating around on social media and the communication that kind of gets out of control, but how do we really try to provide information to people? It is absolutely a collaboration. When I think about our safety summit this fall and some of the things that we took away from that around communication, around safety, but also around parents wanting to really engage with each other and wanting to engage with the district in different ways to develop a deeper understanding of what to do when their kid is vaping, what to do when they can't get their kid to go to school. Parents are expressing that they need some support with some of the safety things that we are struggling with also. So how do we provide information to them to help them support their child, which then in turn helps us? We had an opportunity to do that in December. We had a drug and alcohol event and it was pretty well attended, and got some feedback actually from a participant last night that it was really helpful. So how do we continue to do more things like that so that it isn't about just the school and the school staff working to keep a space safe, but really about how are people really partnering and working together to do that? In terms of monitoring it over time, I think that we have some tools around surveys and different things that help provide some of that feedback. I also think that opportunities to connect and have conversation, listening type sessions really helps us get a sense of that as well.
What about collaborating with the community partners?
The community partners, I would say, clearly we have a strong partnership with Gresham Police, and that is essential in that work. They provide a lot of support and information to us behind the scenes, but also in active situations. The other layer of that is we have a number of culturally specific and mental health organizations that we partner with to help provide services in our school that help more with some of that emotional safety or some of that therapeutic need that our students and staff may need. So thank you for asking that follow-up.
Okay. All right, Director Livingston.
May I ask you my second question?
Your second question. I just figured out how it was working. Okay, I got it.
How will you establish open and transparent communication channels to inform and engage parents about pressing educational priorities and challenging within the Gresham-Barlow School District? How will they be involved in the critical decision-making of the district?
So we have some very traditional lines of communication that we've utilized for a long, long time. And I think one of the things that we really need to dig into is how and in what ways are our families wanting to communicate with us. So we have made some adjustments in terms of text messages and some of those electronic means that are easier for parents in many cases, but we need to be creating spaces to have conversations and really be hearing from them directly. So some examples of that, we have had stronger engagement with parents as we've done curriculum adoptions. We have our district equity committee. We have partnered with parents in lots of different ways in our schools, but really creating spaces where we can provide information, but then also have some Q&A time has really been important. One of the places where I've seen that really be successful for us is with our key communicators. And we do that a couple of times a year. And that is a gathering of different stakeholder groups where we provide some, what's happening in the district, kind of an update, but then have that conversation. And what we found with that is parents attend that pretty well. We also have a Spanish-speaking parent group that we meet with, and that is very well attended. And that is one of the groups that was most impacted and kind of saying the goodbyes to Superintendent Hugh as he was out the door, because that was the first superintendent that they had actually had a face-to-face conversation with. And so there's some structures like that we have in place that are really meaningful and powerful that we need to continue. But we also do those same events and invite staff, and many staff don't show up. So that's not an interaction or a setting that really works for them. So how do we create different spaces for that type of interaction to really have those deeper conversations? And I think anytime that we are gathering information or having gathering feedback when we're trying to make decisions, showing people where their input showed up in the outcome can really help validate that conversation. And if something didn't show up there, why not? What was some of the thinking behind that, or how did that impact the overall process in terms of gathering feedback and making decisions?
Like, that's right. I got so caught up writing things down. Director Peterson.
I'm gonna ask the first
I
one.
was gonna say first.
So Dr. Hunter, in what ways have students and families changed over the course of your career? What challenges and opportunities do those changes present to public education in Gresham-Barlow?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I think about students and families, we have had significant increases in emerging multilingual students and newcomer students, especially in the last couple of years. Also in students that are on IEPs for special education services. And so some of the needs of our students have changed. And some of our families are really wanting support and partnership in how to support their students with their learning. And so there's a lot of opportunity in terms of partnership with families in how to support their students. There's some great conversations and opportunity, I think, especially with the elementary level in terms of conferences and different things that schools do to support students and families in kind of learning the education system. But that needs to kind of continue through middle and high school. And so some of the needs have changed. I think we've also experienced some changes in the level of support or some of that public perception related to public education. And so that creates some opportunity for us to rebuild some bridges and to provide communication and help build some confidence in our system and the work that we do on behalf of students. I find that students and families, and when I say students, I'm really thinking more about high school students, are really hungry for information. There's a lot of things that they see us do or experience things that we do, and they don't have always have a deep understanding of why we're doing what we're doing. So how can we start to create some more open dialogue about why we do some of the things that we do and what are the factors that are in that? Because that can help build some trust, that can help support some of those opportunities. And I really think our students and families really do want to be engaged and they want to participate with us. And how are we changing how we create opportunities for that to happen is really something that we need to continue to focus on and work on. How do we create more voice and opportunity for that? Because that's going to make all of it more meaningful for everybody involved.
Thank you.
From your perspective, What is the proper relationship between the Board of Education and the superintendent as it relates to consequential decisions? What decisions do you bring to the board for action, and what decisions do you make with your team and then inform the board?
In a very basic sense, we know that the board is about policy, about hiring and firing the superintendent, and is really about budget. And yet that is a pretty narrow scope of the what, right, and the work that we do. I am really interested in having a strong board and superintendent team where there is more collaboration, and those lines might be a little more blurry than they have in the past. So a superintendent's role is really more about how we approach the work, kind of the logistics of things and some of the day-to-day, all the operational things. And I think that the board has a role in understanding some of that. I really look forward to some opportunity to do some of what I just described in terms of understanding some of the behind the scenes things, whether it's with instruction, whether it's with operations. And I think there's an important feedback loop that can happen there too. I think we can have a partnership where the board is still really about the what that we do, and a superintendent is really about the how of what we do, but with some collaboration and feedback to support that. In terms of decisions to bring to the board, you know, there's a lot of anything legal, anything, you know, that might end up in the newspaper. Those sorts of things are all things that have to be communicated with the board, but I think the more subtle things are some of the things that are taking place in our schools, or conversations that we have in one-on-one conversations where there's just things that we can work together to kind of understand differently and address, can really support us with that. And if we can be really aligned in our thinking and you can provide feedback in terms of what you're hearing in the community and how different things are landing with them, I think that just makes us all more effective and better supports to our students that way.
Dr. Reardon.
Okay, my second question is, how would you respond to parent complaints about teacher performance?
So how would I, as the superintendent, respond to parent complaints? My first questions would be around what communication has happened already in terms of communication directly with that teacher, communication at the school level with an administrator to try to support that. There's a lot of different layers before things often come to a superintendent. And yet I know that I will receive emails and I will get phone calls, or I will run into people at the grocery store that have something that they want me to know. And so I think a big layer of that is really providing a listening ear, connecting them to resources in terms of people that might be able to support and answer their questions. But also, if it is of high enough level of concern, then there's some digging in there to do for sure. And I think the important thing with any of that is that follow through and closing that loop. Sometimes that is a piece that gets missed. And so being sure that there's a little follow-up with a school principal if that's where someone has been referred. And were you able to connect with this person and help resolve the issues? And if there's something that I can provide to help support that conversation, then I would be happy to do that.
All right, Dr. Barnes.
Describe a problem you faced in your current or previous position. Outline the specific steps you took to resolve the issue, highlighting the details of your decision-making process and any innovative solutions you implement.
The first thing, honestly, that really comes to mind is the phasing out of ESSER funds. And I think that's actually an important one to kind of talk through. So I was the grant manager of those funds, and we had a lot of collaborative conversations about how to use them. But a lot of our forward thinking in terms of how that worked was to not create dependency on those funds with whatever we put in place. So we were very strategic about things we identified, like a building substitute in each of our schools. We knew our system needed that. We knew that would support our staff. And we knew that wasn't going to be a forever solution that we could really rely on. but it really helped us and supported us for a few years. So really thinking about the proactive things that you can do when you're establishing a plan and kind of thinking like, what is the right now and what are the implications for down the road and the future? So those were some of the things that we did on the front end. As we knew when ESSER money was gonna be done. We knew how much money we had. So it really was about kind of backwards mapping, and it was a 2-year process really for us in terms of evaluating what things were kind of roll out of that grant as we transitioned out of that funding stream. That took a lot of conversation with our executive leadership team and a lot of strategy there. It wasn't something I did in isolation by any means, but really being proactive in what that looked like. We ended up in a situation where we had some remaining SIA funds, and so we were able to maintain a couple of things that we had originally planned to fall off. But it was very intentional, it was very strategic. It was really focused on what are the things that we know that we need, what are the things that align with the things that we're working on, what are the supports that our schools desperately need to really support that.
Director Lickett.
First question, how would you initiate a thorough analysis of the current state testing data, pinpointing specific areas of weakness and disparities among different student groups, and then address the identified achievement gaps?
So we have lots of data that we get from the state in terms of that state testing data. And we know that we've been mostly flat, not seeing a lot of growth in those areas. We also have internal measures that we use to kind of inform us about understanding more about what's going on with that state testing data. So we have very consistent challenges around emerging multilinguals and special education students, but then overall, our data is just low. And so we have really worked strategically as we've had school improvement funds to really take some collaborative approaches between our schools for really identifying strategies with their school teams that can benefit more of our schools. So for example, our middle school teams are working together to work on math instruction for emerging multilinguals. There is a coach working with them and their teams to help develop and support some of that work. So that's been a strategy that we've utilized to address that. Similarly, with our high schools, a lot of 9th grade on track work and support in those areas as well. So really targeting specific strategies and making sure that we have that foundation kind of set, but then also systems in place to support students with when they need more support with something, whether it's instructional or whatever that might be. Every year we do evaluate our data. We take a deep look. It informs our school improvement plans, and yet there's a lot of other work that goes into that school improvement process. And so we really have been looking at how we can evaluate what we're doing at the district level and what gaps we have there in terms of supporting our schools with that work to really work to impact the achievement gaps. Yeah, I think that's what I would offer at this point.
All right, Director Peterson.
Dr. Kane, what's your approach to strategic planning? How do you lead this process? Who's involved in envisioning strategic planning, goal setting, action planning processes? How do you seek input and build consensus?
There's just a couple questions
Just a
there.
big runway for you to talk about.
Yeah. Okay. So when I think about strategic planning, there really are some consistent pieces that have to be a part of that process. Some of that is the data analysis. What is the needs assessment, work that we're doing to really look at where we have gaps, where we have areas to do some improvement. So there's that layered needs assessment that really is the start of that work. then that really could move into some community engagement and gathering some feedback. And that can be from a variety of different people. That can be from our ILT teams, that can be from our principal groups, that can be our principal groups gathering feedback from their school teams to all inform that process. As we go through that, then it's really about what are the key themes and what are some, strategies that we're really going to work on to achieve that. And so we really did this 2 years ago as we were putting together our integrated grant process. And that was really the process we used to identify inclusive culture, instructional alignment, equity-driven MTSS, and pathways as our 4 strategic goals. And then from there, lots of work to then now, how are we going to approach and support that work for each of those things? So each of those big strategic items has lots of little sub goals underneath it. And so we've been following that plan for 2 years. We're in an update period right now where we've been revisiting that. We've been gathering feedback from lots of different groups that we've been working with. We have really engaged staff and community differently than we have in the past. We have not been sitting down and said, like, here's our money. What should we spend the money on? It really has been more about having people partner with us to help us develop what the work really looks like. So a recent example, it's something that's happening right now. We are working through our transformative social emotional learning requirements. And so we have a group of 50 or 60 staff member, licensed, classified, and administrators that are gathering regularly to really evaluate the standards and really determine the approach that we take and make recommendations for how we approach that work as a district. That work's been going on for 6 or 8 months now, and they're to the point where now they're looking into curriculum, they're doing some piloting and going to then make some recommendations to all of us. So we've kind of shifted from the district being this decider in some of those things and really being more co-creators with different community groups along the way. So that work has really influenced some of the work for SIA. Other engagement opportunities has been, we had some consultants from New Mexico come up to do site visits of our DLI schools. So as we are working to build our DLI program into middle school, they did an evaluation of our elementary schools to help provide some feedback on some things that we could, consider and improve there, that then leads to a stronger system for middle school. And so all of those things are part of that community engagement piece connected to that and influence how we spend our funds. So really the importance of having that strategic plan, having clear goals, having action steps related to those goals really then drives your funding in terms of where you're making your commitments and where you're really focusing your time and your effort. And in education, we're really good at taking on too many things. And so we practice regularly saying, no, if it's not connected, if it's not, really aligned with what we're trying to do, then sometimes we have to say no, or we'll consider that again later. Yeah.
Okay, so we have reached the end of our questions, and
Okay.
it's an opportunity now if you have some questions. For
I do.
Okay, whoa,
The first, there's kind of a two-parter. So when you think about Gresham-Barlow, what are the stories that you love to tell about Gresham-Barlow? Yeah.
yeah.
I get to go to the schools a lot, right? I have that opportunity, and the staff and the students. I played hockey with Blake's daughter the other day during first period of PE.
Yeah.
I went to Mr. Williams' social studies class and hung out there. Today, I got to go to 2 schools. Stories I like to tell. I think a lot of the people who wanted me to run for this or who supported me to run for it, I should say. Because, how are you gonna get the test scores up? How are you gonna do this? What's going on with the violence, all that stuff? And I love to go back to them and say, you know what? I have firsthand knowledge that 99% of what's going on in those schools is absolutely positive. Absolutely positive. They're like, give me some examples. And I can rattle off examples. And then they trust me
Mhm.
because they know them and they're like, wow, that's actually pretty cool. And that's what I get out of this. That's why I serve, that's why I give my time.
And thank you for telling those stories.
I wouldn't tell them unless they were true.
Yeah. What other stories?
I'll tell the story of, we welcomed a foster kiddo into our home, who was entering second grade and could not recognize his letters. And, he met grade level by the end of second grade. And that was an intensive home engagement process, but also the absolute excellence of his classroom teacher at that level. Those stories, I think, that one's special to me because that child's now moved on to his permanent home. Is thriving in school. I don't think people see those bridges and the absolute individualized instruction and the expertise that it demands of our staff to be able to deliver this kind of outcomes. And a huge success in our home.
Awesome.
I was at Barlow today and I love meeting kids, and them telling me that they have someone that supports them at school and that they have goals, they know what they want to do afterwards. But just hearing the kids' stories and knowing that they're having positive experiences at our schools.
I don't know what they were having for breakfast this morning, but it smelled good.
Probably something with syrup.
Smelling barbecue.
You know, I was a former employee here. I worked started as a young teacher until I went into administration and then came back as a school board member. And when I started here, I wasn't living in the district, but I chose to move into the district because I knew of the amazing teachers and staff administrators that we have. And I was like, I want my child to have that experience. You know, and I was able to experience it with my child so far, you know, where he, like a lot of other kids, had that COVID gap, that COVID lag. And, you know, it's been a long haul, but that gap is starting to close. And I can see it now where, you know, he's kind of a procrastinator and may not get his assignments done on time, but man, when he's out of the gun, he's able to complete those assignments well, you know, not just get like a D or anything on the assignment. So it's been great to see that I personally made the right choice. And what I saw as an educator is true for my family.
I would speak to the community aspect, just growing up here, you know, K through 12 was all in Gresham-Barlow School District. And the community support in our district to me is really evident.
Yeah.
I remember times when my kids said, don't volunteer for this field trip because I want you to volunteer for this overnight field trip, and you can't if you volunteer for the first one because they won't let you do two because there's all these people waiting to volunteer. And that's been true for a long time in our community. And COVID did rock that a little bit because there wasn't access to our schools, but our families want to be engaged with our schools and with our teachers and with our students. And I think that's such a highlight of our district. And then the other thing I would say is the work that some of our teachers do, especially at the elementary level, to differentiate teaching to students. I've been in classrooms in our district and my kids have had some of those teachers where it's amazing to me, actually. I can walk into a classroom of second graders or third graders and they're all working in groups of 5 and they're not talking and they're intentional about what they're doing, and the teacher, they know what the expectations are and they move from group to group, and she's meeting with 5 at a time continually for the hour or whatever it is. There's a lot of those things happening in our district, and I've seen that firsthand with my kids.
Awesome. I had to make some notes. Thank you guys for prompting me for some things. So I've been around a while. I have appreciated that our district continues to invest in our facilities, that we have buildings and spaces that people want to come to, people want to work, students want to be here. Our last curriculum update was very strategic, involved the community, was very creative in how we involved the community. Popcorn at a game if you come and look at the math book. I have not as much time to visit schools, so I have to be very specific about which schools, but I always love doing that. And as a part of that, I try and visit the schools that maybe are not on everybody's first run list. I go to schools where I can't get down on the floor with kindergarten anymore, so that just doesn't work for me. But I try and engage with the kids. One of my best visits was going out to visit at the SSE, and which resulted in going on a field trip, which was quite an interesting endeavor. But a reading group that I got to do with the kids as well. And then again, because I've been around for a while, I have students that come to my business to come and check in with me. They come to see me, they want to let me know what's going on, they appreciate, and especially over the years, seeing the kids grow up and handing them that diploma. And that is something that is absolutely the greatest thing, being a board member, and that ability that we keep track of kids. And there's more that we could do. There's always more that we could do. But that we are focusing on students, and that's where we need to be. And we're not perfect at it, but we're working.
Need to add the technologies.
Yes, it is.
Technology.
Yep. When we made the decision several years ago to go full on with technology, we did it right. And we're still
Yeah.
adjusting, making things, but it was,
It was supposed to take 3 years.
yeah.
Then we did it in 3
Yeah.
weeks. Yeah.
But it is, and it's used in a way that supplements the learning and doesn't replace the learning. It still takes an adult to learn. So I think that's also, does anybody else want to add anything to that?
I appreciate part of what I'm hearing, because one of the things that I think has always been valued in this district is really thinking about the whole child. Really thinking about what are different arts opportunities or athletic opportunities or connections that kids can make. Music and PE finally back in our elementary schools, right? Those sorts of things have always been a piece of what's been important to the work here and continues to be. So my next question is a little bit of dreaming. What stories do you want to be able to tell about Gresham-Barlow? Maybe you can't tell them quite yet.
I
But
want
what
to
do you
be
want
able
to
to
tell?
say that every graduate leaves with a post-secondary plan. A post-secondary plan that they chose, that they had options, not that they were tracked into, or somebody told them that was their only option. I want them to know their options and have a plan. That's my goal.
I think that's possible.
I think so too.
I would like our local business community to say that's a Gresham-Barlow graduate, they are workforce ready.
Nice.
Yes. Did I steal it, Dave?
It's all right. I'm glad you think that way.
Yeah.
I just think I would like for the community and the students and the families to be proud to be here. That this truly is a district of choice, and people are fighting to come into this district.
I'll piggyback on Blake. I want to know that we're developing community members who want to get back. We want to get back in working with the city, working with the businesses, working out there and being philanthropic. Yes. Being able to get to a space where they're able to give back either their time, their money, their resources. That's what I want to see.
I would say, I want our students to feel like their education meant something, that they were engaged enough, that they were taught to be critical thinkers. And so when they graduate, they're proud of that graduation, that it means something to them.
For me, having been through so many times when things were not available, as much flexibility as we can provide for kids to do what brings joy to them, that sparks their interest, because I've said it for years. Unfortunately, kids don't come to school for a math test, but they do come to school for the relationships, the friends, the theater, the music, the sports, the co-curricular. They don't come to school for the basic things that we provide, but they come for the things that we also provide. And so for me, that's always the making sure that we're doing everything we can, that the kids want to be here and families want to be here, and then kids want to stay as adults. So options and things that are relevant to them.
Excellent. So I guess my last question is, we've had a couple of opportunities to engage, and I have shared with you kind of my thoughts and ideas about a board and superintendent team and what that can look like, but also my vision and kind of plans for our future and how we elevate ourselves to kind of that next level. So are there any unanswered questions or things that I can offer some clarity around that you're still wondering about that I can assist with at this point?
The camera's still on, we're just keeping thought.
Oh, it's 8:45 at night. It's
Around.
not- Yep,
Yeah.
yep, that's fair.
I think it's making the strategic choices
Mhm.
that really it's balancing against. If we can't do it all,
Right.
what are the most important things in a broader picture? Not a one-shot deal, but also what's the future impact of something?
Right.
If we remove something, if we add something, what are the impacts to that? Sometimes the removal is worse than.
Yeah.
Than leaving it and trying to accommodate, so kind of playing that balance with it. And making Gresham-Barlow truly a school of choice, school district of choice. Holly went to school here, I went to school here. I stayed here, my kids stayed here, I want future kids to be here.
Yeah, when we bought our first house in Gresham in 2001, the first thing my wife said was, what are the schools like? My son was 3 at the time, that was on her. She did her research, and we were at that time the schools of choice. And I'm not saying that we're not the schools of choice right now, but it was as strong and it was apparent. And that got her to move out here.
It was telling it in Myra, I don't remember what meeting we were at. It's probably, I don't know, our last work session but you had said that you wished that like when you go to a conference and you hear people talk about Gresham-Barlow, that there's things that you wished our community understood about us as well in terms of the work that we do, because we do get recognition at conferences and things, and we have people present and share our work and get lots of positive feedback about that. And yet, sometimes those messages don't get shared in our own community. So part of me wanting to kind of highlight this conversation is we do have amazing education happening in our schools, and we do really think about the whole child. And we still have a lot of work to do in terms of improvement and really thinking about how we continuously focus on that as a district, but also as individuals, and how we kind of take that reflective approach to the work on behalf of our students is really what this is all about. And so.
And even at OSBA conferences, like we are asked, what is your district doing? Other districts reach out and ask us, what are you doing?
Even within MESD, we do a lot of collaboration with them, and a lot of times we're doing the thing and they're following along, and we're leading them that way.
And we have staff who may not like our structures, who may not like how things are going, but they stay because we have a community. They don't want to give up being part of this community.
I will say one thing, and it's based on something that actually happened during the board meeting. There was not even standing during this board meeting, but the news had come because of an issue. And they had put up their camera. And that issue came up, it was public comment, they videotaped it. And then they took their camera down and they left, and there was, how many kids that earned their medal?
Yeah.
Oh, the bi-literacy
By
system.
literacy.
Yes.
I wish they would have kept their cameras on. See what
Yeah.
Great stuff we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's true, I remember that.
Those are the stories we need.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, so anything else? No, no, no. Thank you for coming this evening.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
So. And then, the board is going to discuss, we're gonna go into executive session and discuss what we've learned. And then we will come out of executive session, and if we are ready for a decision, we hope to make one tonight.
Okay.
And, we appreciate you coming and chatting with us.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I think.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, you're good. You're good like clumsy side. No, no, good.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you. Right.
All right, so we are still in session. And, we'll get to.
I don't know.
So we have interviewed all three of our candidates. We've had an opportunity to hear their answers to our questions and their questions that they've had of us. And the board has been asking and answering. So Director Titch, you have a question or comment? Is it something related to what we're going into, or is it just an observation that you want to share? Not right now, okay, all right. So with that, do we need, before we go into executive session, do we need another break for anybody or
Yes.
need, okay, all right, let's take a 10-minute break. we're back. Oh, Blake moved and it confused me. I'm like counting. I couldn't
He
find Blake.
knows I'm gonna go up to the whiteboard in a minute.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
all right.
shoot. I probably moved too.
All right.
It's
So
okay.
the board is back in session. We finished with our interviews. We are getting ready now to recess into executive session to consider employment of a public officer under ORS 192.660(2)(a). The Gresham-Barlow School District Board of Directors will now meet in executive session for the purpose of discussing the following: to consider employment of a public officer. Executive sessions are closed to the public. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. So do you have any press that has requested?
I didn't receive it, let me just. look at the email.
Do they have to pre-authorize that?
Yeah, I didn't receive any press.
Okay, all right, so with that, the board will, meet in executive session. Okay. Mhm. All right, good evening. The Gresham-Barlow Board of Education has returned to regular session on January 22nd, 2025. We would like to thank the exceptional candidates for their effort during this process. We would also like to thank the community for their thoughtful engagement. We did not make a decision in executive session. Now that we are in regular session, I would entertain a motion if there is one for the completion of this meeting.
I would move to hire Dr. Tracy Klinger in the position of superintendent of the Gresham-Barlow School District pending successful contract negotiations.
Second.
It's been moved by Blake, seconded by David, to hire Dr. Tracy Klinger to the position of superintendent of the Gresham-Barlow School District pending successful contract negotiations. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We will be in touch with Dr. Klinger. The board will provide more detailed information in the coming days. We will forego any further discussion about future board agenda topics and closing announcements. We have a work session on February 5th, 2025 at 6 p.m. in the council chambers conference room, followed by 7 o'clock at the regular board business meeting in the council chambers of the Public Safety and Schools building. There being no other business before the board. Thank you for your time this evening. We are adjourned.
Yeah.
Wait for the camera.